Senior Wang Wei, I like you. That was the last thing I heard before I died, and honestly, as far as last words go, it started off pretty flattering. Let me set the stage, because I'm an actor, and setting stages is literally my whole thing. It was the night before our big performance, our drama club stage, empty, just me and the work lights. I was in full costume already, because I'm the kind of actor who shows up a day early to breathe the same air the character breathes. Tomorrow, I was playing a detective. Deerstalker hat, double-breasted coat, white gloves, the whole elegant genius look. I stood there feeling very wise and very British, and then this junior walks in. Sailor uniform, cute little pigtails, a bouquet of champagne roses, the entire package of a girl about to confess her heart out. She beams at me and says she likes me. I sighed the internal sigh of a man who has this conversation more than he'd like, and I told her kindly that it was my rehearsal time and I wasn't dating anyone right now. She shook her head, still smiling. You misunderstand, Senior. I don't want to date you. I like you the way a fan likes an idol. I'm your biggest fan. Great. Fan stuff. I told her there'd be a signing session after the show tomorrow. Photos, autographs, the works. She shook her head again, and this is where the conversation took a hard left off a cliff. No, Senior, I'm not the kind of fan who's happy with a photo. I'm a die-hard fan, like Kyle Peterson. I searched my memory for the name. It clicked. Kyle Peterson was a huge fan of David Bowie. Kyle Peterson also shot David Bowie. Her smile got brighter. The bouquet burst open in her hands, petals raining down like something out of a music video, and out of the flowers she pulled the one object that is the exact opposite of a bouquet of roses. A pistol. My brain, helpful as always, went ahead and identified it. Beretta M9. Thanks, brain. Very useful right now. Here's the thing about a gun appearing in front of you in a country where guns basically don't exist. Your first instinct is, that's a toy, that's a prank, that's a very committed bit. And I wanted to believe that, I really did. But it wasn't the texture of the metal that killed my optimism. It was her eyes, calm, steady, locked on me like I was a target on a range. I'd spent months studying serial killers for roles. I knew that look. That look has a name, and the name is killing intent. Bang. The bullet went through a falling petal and then, with the same casual precision, through my heart. I want to report that my life flashed before my eyes and I found peace. I did not find peace. I hit the floor, all my strength draining out of the hole in my chest, and above me, her voice came down soft and almost holy. June, you be seen by the gods. And the last thought I had, lying there on the stage I loved, was not fear. It was fury. Are you kidding me? This is how it ends? Some inexplicable weirdo? Some random gunshot, and I'm gone? There's a performance tomorrow. There's one next week, next month, for the rest of my life. My acting still needs work. I have never once given a performance I was fully satisfied with. Not once. And I'm supposed to just die here? I really didn't want to die. The universe, as it turns out, heard me. The universe just has a sick sense of humor about how it grants wishes. I opened my eyes in a place that was not the stage. It was pitch black. No floor I could see, no walls, no up, no down. I touched my chest, and there was no wound. The pain was still a memory, but the body was fine. I stood there in the dark like an idiot, wondering out loud whether this was hell, the underworld, or maybe I wasn't dead at all, and I was just a vegetable somewhere with my consciousness stuck in a broom closet, and the void answered me. Blood-red letters bloomed in the black. Welcome to Death Game. Here, we give the deceased who have a strong desire to live a second chance. Participate in the game to receive a new life. Would you like to participate? Now, I'm a college student. I read novels. I watch anime. I have seen exactly this setup roughly 400 times, and I know how it goes. A higher being builds a cruel little game. Dead people get a shot at coming back, and the price is that the game is designed to grind you into paste. I understood the situation perfectly. I also understood that I did not have a choice. If I wanted to live, if I wanted the stage back, there was only one word to say. I'll participate. The letters shifted. Welcome, player Wang Wei. Drawing your initial profession. And then congratulations, with the enthusiasm of a slot machine paying out, it announced I had obtained the unique profession. Fraudster, profession ability, it explained. After you activate it, if your lie is believed by others, it will be manifested to a degree. The degree of manifestation depends on how much they believe you. I read that twice. If people believe your lie, the lie becomes real. The stronger the belief, the more real. I didn't fully get it yet, but somewhere in the back of my skull, a little door opened and something with very good teeth walked through it. Before I could think it over, the void kept talking. Game incoming. Game title. Who is the outsider? Clear condition. Kill all players from other factions or survive until the time limit. Number of players. 7. A bell tolled somewhere enormous, and the dark came apart. I was sitting at the head of a long wooden table. The room was a medieval Baroque nightmare that had clearly given up on cleaning staff a few centuries ago. Heavy carpets, oil paintings, a crystal chandelier, all of it draped in dust and cobwebs and stained here and there with something dark and reddish that I chose not to examine too closely. Moonlight came through a huge window with a carving of the moon's phases above the frame, a castle, an abandoned one, somewhere far away and western and unpleasant. 6 other people sat around the table staring at each other with the exact expression of people who have just been fired out of a cannon into a horror movie. 6 of them, 1 of me, 7. That's the number. So these were the other players. I kept my mouth shut and did what I do best. I watched. 4 men, 2 women, no 2 of them alike in age or vibe, all of them wearing the same face of what is happening. In front of each of us, including me, sat a brown envelope. I clocked it and said nothing. I did not want to be the first one talking. My profession runs on deception, and deception works better from the quiet corner of the room. Someone cracked first, a middle-aged woman in glasses, asking the group whether they'd also died and woken up in a dark space with weird floating text, and that broke the seal. A chubby kid in glasses launched into an eager explanation about anime and cruel games and second chances. A lean guy with a scar across his face slammed the table and cursed the whole situation. A gentle-looking young woman said quietly that at least a game meant they weren't truly dead yet. Scarface snapped at her and she flinched. I filed them all away. The chubby kid read as a naive high schooler who'd never touched grass. Scarface was all bark and short fuse, broadcasting "Don't mess with me" at maximum volume. The 2 who stayed quiet interested me more. A short, twitchy young man who kept licking his lips and scanning the room, and a tall, square-jawed man beside me, calm, resolute, listening to everything, saying nothing, exactly like me. The tall one finally spoke, telling everyone to relax. We were all in the same boat, and I thought, no, we are absolutely not. The wall proved me right. A rustling sound crawled across the stone, and blood-red words wrote themselves out in 3 long lines. 2 outsiders have infiltrated your group of 7. Find them. Drive them out. The gentle girl screamed. The words faded. The envelopes each held a letter. Mine read like something scrawled in a panic. It said the castle had chests. Open any you find, but beware the red ones, because red chests belong to werewolves and hold their weapons, and humans can't open them. It said do the daily schedule of tasks or the castle's traps and poison, fog, and cold would kill everyone. It said there'd be a meeting every evening at 7 where we could vote to banish someone, that the meeting room was sacred and no violence was allowed inside it, and that a tie meant nobody got banished. It said if you found a body, you could call an early meeting. It said werewolves are cunning and hide among humans and look exactly like us, that even werewolves couldn't confirm each other. And it said if any human survived 7 days, everyone could leave, even if the werewolves were never found. Then, at the bottom, a card. Your identity is human. The card, the letter, the envelope, all of it burst into a cold crimson flame and burned to nothing in my hand, not even ashes. Around the table, everybody's paper did the same, and everybody went dead quiet, because now we all understood the same ugly fact. We were not in the same boat. This was a game where the players kill each other. The chubby kid, whose name turned out to be Sun Ran, figured out the shape of it fast. It's werewolf, he said. 5 humans, 2 wolves. The humans do tasks and survive 7 days and try to sniff out the wolves. The wolves hide, find their weapon chests, and murder every human before the week is up. Nobody argued, and I looked around the table at 6 strangers, at least 2 of whom wanted me dead, and I thought, okay, time to go to work, because here was my problem. My profession was fraudster, and fraudster is worthless the second anyone knows what it is. Announce it, and you've handed the wolves a neon sign that says, I am lying to you professionally. So the whole trick was to be someone else, to pick a profession and wear it like a costume until everyone in the room believed the costume was skin. Lucky for me, costumes are the family business. We agreed to go around the table and introduce our professions, on the theory that knowing everyone's abilities would help us build a strategy. The tall, square-jawed man went first. Ji Kang. Profession soldier, ability, 5 times physical enhancement. He said it flat and confident, and you could feel the room recalibrate around him, because that's a genuinely terrifying thing to be in a game where somebody's going to try to stab you. Scarface, whose name was Guo Lei, was a thug. Ability, ignore 1 rule, 1 time. He made sure to add a threat on the end, because of course he did. The woman in glasses, Feng Yan, was a teacher, and her ability let her pull 1 piece of useful game info. I looked at her simple clothes and the thick calluses on her writing fingers and thought, yeah, that tracks. She's a real teacher, which was when it clicked for me. These professions weren't random. They matched who these people actually were in real life. Sun Ran, the chubby kid, was a homebody, and coyly refused to explain his ability, which annoyed everyone. The twitchy short guy, Song Bo, was a thief and flat refused to say anything at all. And the gentle girl, Mei Ling, was a veterinarian, ability, heal small animals, which Guo Lei immediately mocked as useless. Then everyone looked at me. I laced my fingers together on the table. I let the room go still around me, the way it goes still when a spotlight finds you. I have felt that exact silence 100 times on 100 stages, and it is the most comfortable I ever feel. I started by pointing out the pattern. Professions match real lives. Soldiers got the bearing of a soldier. Sun Ran looks like he was born in a computer chair. Mei Ling's literally wearing a lab coat. Ms. Feng, you teach, don't you? And she nodded. Yes, middle school. Snap. Reasoning confirmed, and now they were listening to me the way you listen to someone who just did a magic trick. And then I told them my profession was detective. My ability, I said, was to verify anyone's identity. The reaction was instant and frankly, insulting. Half the table did not buy it for a second. Mei Ling jumped in. This game is literally about identity, and your power is checking identities. Convenient. Too convenient. I think you're lying. Feng Yan added that our professions were assigned before the game started, so they shouldn't be tailor-made for this specific game. Jie Kang just stared at me with quiet scrutiny. Inside, I was sweating because I could feel my fraudster ability sitting there doing absolutely nothing. If they'd believed me, I'd already be a detective. I wasn't. Belief was too thin. These people were not fools, and I'd oversold it. Fine. Adjust. Adjust on the fly is the only skill an improv actor really has. I straightened my hat, calm as a lake. You're right, I said. My ability isn't literally to verify identities. The reason I said that is because my real ability can do that, as a side effect. My actual power is to know one hidden secret about a person, and in a game about hidden identities, well, what's a more useful secret than that? Feng Yan frowned and asked why I hadn't just said so. Because, I said, people get defensive when they hear you can pry into their secrets, wouldn't you? And that did it. Because it was reasonable, and because now they didn't just believe me, they resented me. Nobody likes the guy who can read their secrets. I watched wariness and even a little disgust ripple around the table, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen because riding on top of that disgust was belief. Real belief. And bathed in it, I felt something switch on inside me. A brand new sense, like an extra limb I'd been born with. If I wanted, I could pick anyone in that room and pull one secret straight out of their skull, their identity in this game, or something else, my choice. Fraudster had fired. The detective was real now. I'd lied a power into existence, which was great, right up until I remembered the downside. In this kind of game, the guy who can check identities is the single most dangerous person alive, and every wolf at this table now knew exactly who to kill first. I'd painted a target on myself the size of the moon carving over that window. The only safe move would be to never leave anyone's sight, and I already knew, with total certainty, that this game was never going to let me do that. Right on cue, an alarm started shrieking from somewhere above the ceiling. Jie Kang, cool as ever, reminded everyone about the schedule. The castle wanted its chores done, and if we didn't do them, the traps came out to play. There was a list on the wall by the door, not hidden at all, just a wall of tasks. Repair the generator, second floor engineering room, 10 minutes, countdown ticking. Refuel the equipment, third floor. Clean the library, first floor. On and on, a dozen jobs, all with their own timers, all scattered to opposite corners of a castle the size of a small country. And I understood the real design immediately. The tasks weren't tasks. They were a crowbar. Too many jobs, too far apart, no way to finish if we all clumped together. The game wanted us split up. Split up is how the wolves get you alone. Guolei wanted to sprint off solo to fix the generator. I stopped him. You want to walk around alone in a castle with 2 werewolves in it? Even Sun Ran backed me. Worst thing you can do in werewolf is go solo. But then Jie Kang did something interesting. He agreed we should split into groups and then argued that pairs were actually safe because if your partner dies, you're the obvious suspect. So really, he said, everybody in a pair is protected, and then he announced he'd be going alone because he was confident he could handle a wolf even if it had a weapon. I didn't say anything, but a small alarm of my own started going off. Everyone at this table was optimizing to win the game. Nobody was optimizing to just survive, and those are not the same thing, not even close. It's a death game, sure, but it's not actually a game, is it? Shouldn't the first instinct of a dead person clawing for a second life be, I don't know, don't die? Why was nobody pushing back on this? I was still chewing on that when somebody tugged my sleeve. Mei Ling, the gentle veterinarian, looking up at me with her lips pursed. Detective, she said, can I team with you? We ended up in pairs and a spare. Me and Mei Ling, Guolei and Song Bo, Sun Ran and Feng Yan, and Jie Kang, the one-man army, off on his own. We grabbed our tasks and scattered into the castle, which is exactly what the castle wanted, and I walked off into the dark with a girl who'd handpicked me as her partner, thinking to myself, sweet, of all 6 strangers, I get to be alone with the one I understand the least. Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. The engineering room was easy to find, mostly because it was the thing screaming. An old generator sat in the middle grinding away, one bulb glowing angry red and beeping like it wanted to die. Mei Ling looked at it helplessly and asked if there was a manual because she was a veterinarian and machines were not her department. There was actually a greasy little booklet under the toolbox titled, and I am not making this up, Wolf 3 Generator Instruction Manual. Even the appliances in this place were on theme. The fix was simple. Red light meant low lubricant, and lubricant lived in the first floor storeroom. Mei Ling offered to run down and grab it. I put on my best cold, arrogant detective face and told her we weren't supposed to split up. She smiled and pointed out correctly that the task was on a timer and one of us should stay and study the machine. Fine. I told her to be back in under 5.5 minutes or she'd be in danger. She skipped off happily. I did not tell her that 5.5 minutes was a number I invented on the spot. I just wanted her back fast. The door shut. And the second I was alone, I let the mask fall off my face like it weighed 40 pounds. I rubbed my eyes and, for exactly 1 minute, let myself be honest. Because here's what none of them knew. I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't a famous detective. I was a second-year drama student whose entire resume was some stage plays, a self-taught psychology hobby, and the ability to force myself calm because I'd stood in front of a lot of audiences. That was the whole toolkit. And in a game where the losing move gets you a knife in the ribs, that toolkit felt about as reassuring as a tent full of holes. I couldn't track everybody. I couldn't read minds. I couldn't really stare down death. I could just perform a man who could and pray nobody looked too hard. Something about this game was wrong. I'd felt it from the first minute, in the rules, in the way these people moved, in a dozen details I couldn't name. I shelved it. If you can't solve it, don't chew on it. Use your 5 minutes. So I searched for a chest and found nothing but junk and diesel fumes that made the room spin. I gave up and checked the door across the hall, which turned out to be the kitchen, which turned out to be a mistake. The kitchen was where the castle stopped pretending. Dark stains up the walls, more on the floor, and on the counter. Meat. Not groceries. Meat that had once been attached to things, shriveled and twisted and almost, but not quite, shaped like a person. I looked at it exactly long enough to understand it, and then I looked away and did not look back. And I told myself very firmly that whatever the owner of this castle ate, I did not need the recipe. My stomach tried to leave through my throat. I let it lose that argument and walked out. But in the corner outside the kitchen, a brown chest. Brown. Human. The letter said red belonged to wolves, and humans couldn't open those, so a brown one was mine. I flipped the latch and it clicked, and inside, of all the anticlimactic things, was a loaf of bread and a bottle of water. I ate it standing up. After that kitchen, I wasn't sure I could, but a dead man's gotta eat. I decided not to tell Mei Ling about any of it. Not the chest, not the bread. Because proving I could open a brown box would prove I was human, and the letter told us the wolves don't know each other. So if Mei Ling was a wolf, she wouldn't move until she was sure of her teammate, and me announcing I was safely human did nothing but tell her which one of us was prey. Better to stay a question mark. She came back at 8 minutes, late, flushed, messy, sweaty, apologizing that the lubricant had been stored up high. I wanted to say something kind. My cold detective said something clipped instead, and I fixed the machine, and I filed away those extra 2.5 minutes somewhere in the back of my head. Our next task was on the far side of the second floor, a prayer room of all things, and after the kitchen I braced for the worst. The prayer room was, weirdly, spotless. Dark, curtained, 2 dim candles, and a shrine holding a tall, muscular, headless statue with the moon carved behind it. Below it, an altar of offerings. Mei Ling saw the offering in the center and screamed, and I looked, and my heart did a bad thing, because it was a human head with the face taken off it. I want to be clear that I registered this, felt the full horror of it, and then decided, on purpose, to be a man who was fine. Because somebody had to light the candles, Mei Ling was frozen against the wall, and sometimes performing calm is the fastest road to actually being calm. I moved the offering, lit the 2 dead candles, finished the task, and walked us both back into the hallway before either of us could throw up. She thanked me, pale and shaky, and then on the stairs we ran straight into Sun Ran and Feng Yan, nowhere near where their tasks were, clutching each other and eyeing us like we jumped out of a closet at them. 2 suspicious pairs in one afternoon. Earlier, I'd caught Guo Lei and Song Bo roaming the first floor hunting for someone, which humans have no reason to do. Now the teacher and the otaku were somewhere they had no business being. I said something reassuring to Mei Ling and kept my mouth shut about the real thought, which was getting louder. Everyone in this castle was acting wrong, not one person wrong, all of them wrong, and I still didn't have a name for it. We ground through the rest of the chores like a hellish exam week, and by the time the bell tolled for the evening meeting, I was so tired I'd almost stopped being scared, which is its own kind of dangerous. Everyone made it back alive. Ji Kong pointed this out, and not as good news. No deaths on day 1, he said, means the wolves are patient. If one of them had cracked today, we'd have a suspect. That's the whole point of pairing up. cheerful guy. Sun Ran countered that, with a detective on our side, we could clear one person a day, so the wolves were already losing. And then every face turned to me, waiting for my report. Awkward, because I'd already spent my check. During the day, I'd reached into Guolei's head and asked for his identity and watched a memory play from behind his eyes. Guolei, hunched over, hiding his card behind a scrap of paper. Your identity is werewolf. So I knew. I had a confirmed wolf sitting 8 feet away. And I told them nothing. I said I'd used my ability, but couldn't share the result yet, and then I sold that refusal like my life depended on it, because it did. Think about it, I said, before Sunran could finish sputtering. What if the person I checked came back human? The wolves don't know each other. Announce a human, and I've handed the wolves a safe kill and narrowed their own hunt for a teammate. Naming a wolf is the only move that helps us, so my silence is protecting you. It was, and I want to stress this, complete garbage. Any real human would demand the detective talk or die. But I dressed the garbage in a nice suit, delivered it with total conviction, and proposed we skip the vote and wait for tomorrow. And they agreed, all of them. Instantly. Nobody at that table fought to make the seer talk under threat of death. Nobody even glanced at tomorrow's schedule. They just quietly, comfortably let it go. That was the moment the wrongness finally started forming into a shape. A crazy shape. One I did not want to look at yet. We spent the night in the meeting room, safe, nobody sleeping, everyone spread out and pretending. I sat by the clock because at midnight my check refreshed, and when the 12 chimes came I spent it on Jie Kong, another memory. Jie Kong opening his envelope, glancing at his card so fast I nearly missed it, tucking it away. Your identity is werewolf. 2 confirmed wolves, which, if the game really had 2 wolves, meant it was already over. I'd won. I should have felt relief. I didn't feel relief. I felt the crazy shape in the back of my head stand all the way up, and I closed my eyes and told it, fine. Tomorrow we find out if I've completely lost my mind. Morning. New tasks, same groups. Mei Ling yawned her way over to me, called me detective, and we headed up the middle stairs while the other groups peeled off. And once their footsteps faded, I stopped, and I turned around, and I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said her name, not veterinarian. Mei Ling. That surprised her. What are you thinking? She said. And I said, I detected a werewolf yesterday. She brightened. Really? Who? And I said, it was you. She went very still. Then she sighed, and this sad little smile crossed her face, and she said, what a pity. I actually had feelings for you. I wasn't planning to kill anyone, and she lifted the hem of her lab coat and drew a dagger from her waistband. She asked me softly, when I'd started to doubt her, and why, and I told her the truth. Maybe it's because your acting is so bad, veterinarian, because that was the answer. From the first minute of our team up, her innocence had been a performance, a bad one. All that timid, lively, unguarded charm had performance smeared all over it, and I read amateur theater the way a chef reads a microwave dinner. She was hiding something. Fine. Suspicious. But here's the part where the crazy shape in my head finally stood up in the light, and I got a good look at it. It wasn't just her. It was everyone. Jie Kong shoving us all into pairs. The whole table not objecting. Guolei and Songbo wandering out of their zones. Sun Ran and Feng Yan suddenly glued together. And most of all, last night, when I told them the seer wouldn't be reporting, and every single one of them just went, sure, okay, sounds good. That was insane. And there was one rule nobody had ever actually said out loud. Nobody ever told us there were only 2 werewolves. 2 wolves was our guess. Our conclusion, built from a werewolf game we assumed we understood. But I ranked first in my class in stage design, and I read rooms like sets, and I finally read this one. The wolf motifs everywhere. Human remains in the kitchen. A human head on the altar. Human supplies stacked around like a stagehand dropped them in an hour before curtain, and the question that unlocked all of it. The owner of this castle, whoever built this set, was he ever human? So then, the words on the wall. 2 outsiders have infiltrated your group of 7, and the name of the game, the title I saw before I even walked in. Who is the outsider? It wasn't a mystery, it was a hint. In this game, the humans are the outsiders. 5 werewolves, 2 humans. The rule that wolves can't recognize each other wasn't flavor, it was load-bearing. It was the only thing keeping 5 wolves from instantly ganging up on 2 humans and ending it in a minute. Whoever figured out what outsider really meant, first, won the game. I felt myself smile, and Mei Ling, standing 3 steps below me with a knife, asked why I was smiling. Which was fair. Because knowing the truth doesn't make the knife less sharp. Here's the thing she didn't know. I was more afraid of her being exposed than she was, because if Mei Ling got outed as a wolf, I didn't just lose. I lost my imaginary 4 human teammates, and worse, the other wolves might start counting and realize the number was wrong. My whole edge was that I knew a secret nobody else did. Exposure burned the secret. So Mei Ling could not be dragged into the light. Mei Ling had to just quietly disappear. And there were only two ways for a human to win this. Trick the wolves into voting each other out, or hunt them. Because nothing in the rules ever said the humans were the prey. The game screamed that the wolves were strong, that they had the weapon chests, but it never once said we couldn't kill them right back. So I stalled. I told her I already knew both wolves, and that this morning I'd checked and found her other teammate too, which was Catnip, because she genuinely didn't know who her partner was, and she wanted that intel more than she wanted me dead. She smiled and asked how I'd figured out her teammate. Her teammate disguised himself so well, she said. And I said, it's simple, although your teammate hid it very well, And then I turned and ran up the stairs. She bought it for half a second, then bolted after me, because letting the guy who knows your secret escape is the one thing she couldn't allow. 2 steps up, I spun and drove my heel into her stomach. She went off balance and off the stairs, 7 or 8 steps down onto her back. Her wrist cracked when she landed and the dagger jumped out of her hand, and before she could scream, I was on it, and it was over. I said sorry. I meant it, a little. This is the only way I could think of to win. And out of the corner of my eye, I caught a short, twitchy figure watching from the 3rd floor landing before it ducked away. Song Bo. So. Confirmed wolf number 3. Which meant my one human teammate was either Sun Ran or Feng Yan. I stood there over her with the blood on me and gagged, real and involuntary, because it turns out killing someone with your own hand is different from scheming 5 deaths. And then, once the twitchy shape was gone, I turned the nausea off like a tap. He hadn't needed to see the performance, but it never hurts to have one ready. No amount of she attacked first, or it was for survival, or she's already dead, actually made it clean. It was murder. My murder. But you know what the blood on my hands actually taught me, standing there? That I wanted to live. I wanted the stage back. I wanted to give one performance I was proud of, and I wanted to find out why some girl in a sailor uniform had decided to end me. These people would kill without blinking. Fine, so would I. I tucked the dagger under my coat and went downstairs, where I walked straight into Sun Ran and Feng Yan. Sun Ran asked where Mei Ling was. I spread my hands and played baffled. We got separated. I'm looking for her too. Tell her to come find me on the 1st floor. And I walked off, counting down in my head. 5, 4, 3, 2. The emergency bell hit before I got to one. They'd found the body. The sky outside slammed to black. The schedule froze. The clock jumped to 7, and everyone filed into the meeting room while I sat down and made myself comfortable. Sun Ran, ashen, pinned it on me immediately. He and the teacher had found Mei Ling's body on the very stairs where they'd just passed me coming down alone. I'd said we got separated and left. It was a good accusation. It was the correct accusation. So I did the only thing you can do with a correct accusation, which is to become extremely loud. I stood up, braced my hands on the table, and laughed at him. Gentlemen, I did not kill anyone. This fat idiot is lying about me. Would a werewolf really murder his own veterinarian first? I've already checked him, by the way. And I pointed at Sun Ran and announced, with the full confidence of a man reading a verdict, that his identity was werewolf. He killed Mei Ling and framed me, the highest status player on the field. Vote out the otaku tonight, the teacher tomorrow. Game over. My logic was, technically, insane. But volume covers a lot of sins, and Sun Ran was shaking too hard to answer, until he pulled a small device out of his pocket, about the size of a walkie-talkie, and held it up like a cross at a vampire. Fine, detective. You said Mei Ling's death has nothing to do with you. Say it again to this lie detector. Feng Yan added helpfully that it could only test 1 sentence a day. Then she caught herself and looked faintly embarrassed for having told me that. Interesting. I filed it away. Of the two of them, the teacher was starting to look a lot more like my human teammate. And I looked at the lie detector, and I did not sweat because Sun Ran had just handed me a gift and didn't know it. Turn it on, I said, right now. I looked into the little red eye and said, clearly, Mei Ling's death has absolutely nothing to do with me. The lie detector screamed and flashed red. Sun Ran jumped up like he'd won the lottery. Liar. And I let a flicker of shock cross my face, which was also a lie, because getting caught was the entire plan. See, I needed the whole room to believe I was the ironclad werewolf. Especially the 2 guys who mattered. Guo Lei and Song Bo, who by now had probably recognized each other as wolves and were feeling pretty secure about the math. I needed to shake that. I needed them looking at me thinking, wait, is he one of us? Is the count wrong? That's why I'd killed Mei Ling on a wide-open staircase where a body was guaranteed to be found fast. I wanted to look as guilty as humanly possible. The most obvious wolf in the room reads, to the actual wolves, like a teammate. So when the machine called me a liar, I did not fold. I argued with it like a man arguing with a parking ticket. Maybe the light's broken. You say it's a lie detector. I say it's a phonograph. Maybe it's a nail clipper. And even if I did lie, so what? Her death is related to me, isn't it? Since we got separated and then you killed her. I threw enough noise into the room to bury the needle, and Sun Ran, furious, called the vote. Flame bloomed in front of each of us and dropped a slip of paper and a quill. Write the name you want banished. I wrote Sunran. He, obviously, wrote me. The papers burned, and the result crawled up the wall. Wang Wei, 1 vote. Sunran, 1 vote. A tie. Nobody banished. Sunran's jaw hit the floor. And before he could ask the obvious question, which was why did nobody else vote for the guy the lie detector just caught, I got loud again and asked it for him, furiously, on his behalf. Why aren't you people voting the otaku out? He insulted me, the detective, the highest status man in this room. Do you even know how to play this game? He wanted to ask me a question of his own. It was written all over his face. Why are you saying all my lines? And why, you werewolf, are you in such a hurry? But the other 4 just settled in to rest, comfortable with the logic of, well, nobody died and nobody got banished, so today was fine. Sunran stewed in the corner and eventually snored, and I slept better than I had in weeks, which probably says something unflattering about me. Day 3. Jie Kang at the schedule looked at me and asked what a man whose partner just died planned to do. Sunran immediately volunteered to keep me on a leash in Jie Kang's group. I shut that down from the moral high ground, the actor's favorite ground. Put a suspected werewolf next to Brother Wei, I said. Are you gambling with his life? You know wolves can have weapons. Even a 5-time soldier shouldn't be put at risk like that. Sunran turned red and couldn't get a word out, and Jie Kang gave me a long, unreadable look and said, fine, we'll do it your way. I went solo. Exactly what I wanted. I took a kitchen task, and the second the door shut sagged against the counter, because last night's performance had done its job. 4 of the remaining wolves now half believed I was one of them. And right on schedule, the kitchen door creaked and Songbo slid in, all nerves and smiles, calling me Brother Wang. I played wary. Why are you alone, thief? Where's your teammate? And he pulled out a hand axe with a wolf's head on the handle and grinned. Big brother, I know you're a wolf. We're teammates. I let my face do surprise, then suspicion, and reached for my dagger in case he'd stolen a wolf weapon just to bait me, and that got him talking, which was the point. His thief ability, he explained, let him steal 1 random item a day. He'd used it on Guo Lei, pulled out a wolf's watermelon knife, and that's how the 2 of them had confirmed each other, and that's when I spotted it. The beautiful, fatal little hole in his story. Because Guo Lei's profession was thug, and a thug can ignore 1 rule. Like, say, the rule that humans can't open a red wolf chest. Oh no, I said, letting my face go dark. You got played. Guo Lei's a human. He used his thug ability to crack a wolf chest and pull out a weapon just to look like a wolf, and now he knows your identity and you don't know his. I even added, I checked him today, he's human, and Songbo's whole face fell apart because it fit. Guo Lei was exactly arrogant and volatile enough to do that, so I fed the fire. A selfish guy like that would love to watch the wolves kill a few people first, maybe even hunt you himself. Strike first, before he's ready. Kill him. Songbo picked up his axe with murder in his eyes and thanked me for being such a smart teammate and left to go kill Guo Lei. And I watched him go, smiling, because it did not matter 1 bit who won that fight. Either way, the werewolf count just went down by 1, and I hadn't lifted a finger. All I'd done was hand each wolf the knife shaped exactly like the other wolf. Now I needed my 1 human teammate back. So I went hunting for a bedroom on the 3rd floor where Sunran and Feng Yan had a task, and I got there first, and I found an unopened brown chest waiting like a party favor. Then Sunran huffed up the stairs alone, and I grabbed him before he could yell, dagger to his throat, and told him if I wanted him dead, he'd already be dead, so shut up and listen. I told him the truth. I killed Mei Ling, but she was a wolf, and I took her knife and returned the favor. The rules never said a human can't kill a wolf. Use your pig brain. Would the game hand the single most important information roll to the wolf team? He wasn't buying it, so I opened the brown chest in front of him, pulled out bread and water, and let go of him. Humans can open these. I'm human. And so are you. And that broke him open. He gaped at me. And then, bless him, he apologized for accusing me, and then because he genuinely could not help himself, added, but honestly, it's a little your fault. You acted exactly like a werewolf last night. I did that on purpose, I said. Aren't you curious why I acted like a wolf and only got your vote? Because there's a text trap in this whole game. The humans are the 2 outsiders. Soldier, thug, vet, thief, teacher, all wolves. Just you and me. Sunran stared, then muttered that yeah, actually, Teacher Feng never had opened a human box. She'd made him open the ones for the lie detector and the pistol. And I said, right, the teacher. And then my brain caught up. Wait, pistol. Yeah, he said. Feng Yan's teacher ability pulled game intel, and the intel was that the humans had 2 power items. The lie detector, 1 lie a day, and a pistol, 1 bullet, but that bullet always hits. And where, I asked, feeling my stomach start its slow descent, is the pistol? With Teacher Feng. So the single greatest weapon the humans had was sitting in the hand of a werewolf. I asked Sunran what his real ability was, and he told me, honestly, that when he stayed still, his stamina drained 1/3 as fast, and he healed 3 times faster. I looked at this soft, kind, useless kid, my one ally in a castle of killers, and I thought about that guaranteed hit bullet and said, half serious, hey, since it's only one bullet, could you maybe take the hit and just lie very still and let it heal? His face went white, and I sighed and said kidding, and I mostly was. A soldier was already almost impossible to kill. Now there was an armed teacher too. I was standing there trying to figure out which impossible thing to ambush first when the bedroom door opened, and it turned out the game had picked for me. Ji Kong and Feng Yan walked in together, the two people I least wanted to see, at the same time, in the same doorway. Feng Yan had the revolver, a pretty thing with a carved wooden handle, and the two of them stood close, the easy closeness of people who trust each other, which meant they'd already had a standoff, the gun had ended it, and they'd both worked out the same truth I had. 5 wolves. Humans are the outsiders. I did the only thing left. I threw Sunran under the bus at the speed of light. Well, I said, only the fat guy's human now, to sell myself as one of them. Sunran made a wounded noise. Then Songbo slouched in, blood on his shirt, which meant Guo Lei was dead, and started winking at me to double-team the humans. Feng Yan leveled the gun at him and told him flatly, I'm a wolf like you, 5 wolves, humans are the outsiders, so stop scheming. I still had 1 performance left. I gave them the whole story about how I'd thought Guo Lei was human, how the thief and thug's mutual wolf recognition looked fake to me, how I'd been misled, how sorry I was. Thief brother, I got arrogant. It was a good speech. Sun Ran was staring at me like I really was a wolf. Songbo was buying it. Even Feng Yan wavered. And then Jie Kong smiled and said, Detective, you're very dangerous. Your words are too convincing, and if I didn't have proof, I'd have fallen for it. And my stomach finished its descent and hit the floor. Your dagger, he said. That's the veterinarians. He'd finished his tasks fast, wandered around alone on day 1, and happened to see Mei Ling duck into a storeroom. He'd hidden, and after she left he'd gone in and found an opened wolf weapon case. He knew that dagger. He knew it was a wolf's, that she'd carried it, and that the only way I had it was if I'd killed her and taken it, which made me the human. Of all the rotten luck, you cannot plan around a man who happened to be in the right hallway on the right afternoon. I already knew what was under Ji Kong's calm because I'd looked. His secret was an ugly one. A soldier who'd smuggled to pay 400,000 for his mother's kidney transplant, uremia, and who'd beaten his own squad monitor half to death with a rock when the man tried to stop him. Ruthless and decisive, and now he looked at me with those flat eyes and said, Stop struggling, detective. It doesn't matter if you're human. There are 5 werewolves. 1 or 2 of us dying changes nothing. I'm killing you today. And for one ugly second I actually thought, why not just die? I was already dead once. And then I threw that thought straight out the window. I did not claw my way out of a bullet on my own stage to quit over one unfair castle. If the gods stuck me on the human side, maybe it's because they think I'm worth more than all 5 of these people put together. And if I'm the great fraudster, well, I should never have picked detective. I should have said I was a gunslinger who could summon an AK with infinite bullets. Except no, nobody would have believed the AK. And if I hadn't been the detective, I'd never have spotted the trap in the first place. The tools were the tools, and I needed a new idea, right now, or I was going to be a corpse for the 2nd time in a week. And a crazy one showed up. The kind of crazy that only shows up when you're already dead. Jie Kong asked if I had any last words, and I gave him a tired, defeated little smile, the smile of a man who has lost this exact argument before, and I said, Sigh. I lost to you again. Again. That word landed like a hook because a clever man cannot leave again alone. What do you mean again? He snapped. Have we met? Feng Yan told him to ignore me. I was bluffing, but I was too calm. Nobody dies this calm just to build a mystery. So I turned to Sunran, and I said, Hey otaku, you love Danganronpa and Detective Conan, you like Aihaibara, and there's a new show you're watching this season, isn't there? He gaped. How did you know? Because 9 out of 10 Conan otaku love Aihaibara, that's how, but I didn't say that part. I turned to Feng Yan. Ms. Feng, you teach a graduating class, good grades, but there are 1 or 2 students you lie awake worrying about, and your own kids' grades keep you up too, don't they? She whispered. How did you know? Because a dedicated teacher always takes the exam class, and I have never in my life met a teacher who was satisfied with their own child's grades. But I didn't say that either. I turned to Songbo. Thief, you've had it rough. Your parents did you dirty, and now that you've died, you really want to come out and go straight, right? His mouth fell open. It's a party trick, honestly. The Barnum effect. Say something vague and flattering and specific sounding, fast, before anyone can think, and let the shocked faces of the first 3 convince the 4th. And the 4th was Ji Kong, so I saved the real ammunition for him. I already had his secret. And you, I said, I've never liked you, but you're pitiful too. Your mother, the uremia. Even after the transplant, you'll be caring for her a long time. His face went dark and dangerous. What the hell do you want? And I spread my arms and let the last biggest lie roll out. This isn't my first time playing this game. You just don't keep your memories. For me, we've done this more than 10 times. That's how I know all of you. That's how I know why every single one of you wants so badly to live. The room came apart. That's impossible. You're insane. What are you saying? Feng Yan pointed at me and said, "This is just your detective ability, isn't it?" And I laughed, and I reached into Sun Ran's pocket and pulled out the lie detector. "Let's not even discuss how I'd know your secrets on day 3, I said. "Listen carefully. What I actually awakened isn't detective. It's a unique profession." I pressed the button. The light lit. And I said, "My profession is player. My ability is rewind." The lie detector glowed green. Truth. Because here's the thing about Fraudster, the thing I'd finally understood all the way down. To fool other people, you first have to fool yourself. And I am, professionally, an immersive actor. Right then, standing there with a knife at my chest, I believed it more than any of them. I believed my profession was player and my ability was rewind, believed it in my bones, and the lie detector believed me because I wasn't lying, not to myself. Sun Ran lost it. Rewind, like Re-Zero, like Edge of Tomorrow, you can go back and start over. I nodded. Jie Kong, sharp even now, said there had to be a limit, a condition, and rushed me and put a fist in my face with real soldier weight behind it. Teeth left my mouth, blood, dizziness, the whole world ringing, but I couldn't pass out. Not yet. I spat blood and teeth on the floor and looked up at him, and I laughed, because a performance is only over when the audience believes the ending. "Why haven't you killed me yet?" I said. "You've got weapons, and you're punching me. Do you just love beating people to death, Ah Kang?" I looked past him at the others. "Did you know this upright soldier is a murderer? Funny how Guolei's a thug and Songbo's a thief, but his profession isn't traitor or smuggler or something more honest." "Enough," he growled, and I stood up on shaking legs and screamed it right into his face. "Hit me on the head, just like you hit your squad monitor. Come on, Ah Kong, you smuggling traitor. Your mother must be so proud, curing her illness with dirty money." Songbo shouted, "Wait, his rewind condition might be getting killed." Too late. Jie Kong went fully berserk, drew his blade and put it through my chest, roaring that I was never to speak of his mother again. I went down, and there wasn't any pain on my face, only a faint, satisfied sneer. "What a piece of trash," I said. "You're the one who insulted her." And I looked around at all of them and told Songbo he was clever. He'd almost guessed my condition. "And next time, please, just vote me out. This dying is exhausting." And I fell back, and I let go, and my last thought was, "Great. See you next time, Jie Kong." And I believed it with everything I had left, because belief was the whole trick, and I fell all the way down into the dark, trusting, absolutely, that I would come back. And somewhere out past the black, a voice I'd never heard, the kind of voice that runs the whole machine, said quietly, that was truly amazing. I opened my eyes at the head of the long table with all my teeth back in my mouth. The clock said 5 minutes to 7 in the morning. The others were still slumped over, asleep, and I understood. They hadn't woken up yet. They were still being handed their professions in the dark. My body had gotten here first. Rewind had given me a 5-minute head start on the entire game, which was a miracle, and also nowhere near enough, because knowing the trap didn't change the fact that as long as a fanatic like Jie Kong was on the wolf side, the human math was brutal, and I could feel it in my bones, in the fraudster part of me, that a second rewind wasn't coming. A miracle that spits in fate's face like that doesn't fire twice in a row, no matter how hard you believe. Whatever God ran this game, he wasn't going to sit there and watch me abuse the save button forever. He'd let me have one. One was the gift, one was the whole gift, so the last round wasn't enough, and I had exactly 5 minutes and one crazy idea. I stood up, I gathered all 6 envelopes off the table, and I walked out of the meeting room, shut the door behind me, hid my own envelope under the hall carpet, counted to 1, and shoved the door back open. They were waking up now, blinking at each other. Lost. I flicked the brim of my hat, swept my eyes across the room, and smiled the smile of something that does not need their permission to exist. "Not bad," I said. "Everyone's will to survive is strong." You all woke up nice and fast. And then, warmly, like a host welcoming guests to a dinner party, none of them would leave. Lost sheep. "Welcome to my game. Who is the outsider?" Because if the human side couldn't win this game, then I simply wasn't going to be on the human side anymore. I was going to be the one who ran it. I was going to play God. Sun Ran, of course, was the first to bite. "Are you the master of this game? Are you a god?" I did not say I was a god. I never say the big lie out loud if someone will say it for me. I just smiled a deep, unreadable smile and told him I preferred to be called administrator. Then I introduced everyone to each other. This is Guo Lei, who awakened thug. This is Sun Ran, who awakened homebody. This lovely lady is the veterinarian, Mei Ling. This robust gentleman is the soldier, Jie Kong. The clever-looking one beside me is the thief, Song Bo. And this lady in glasses is the teacher, Feng Yan. Name after name, profession after profession, delivered like I'd written the guest list myself, because I had. By the time I finished, the room believed I was divine, because how else could a stranger know all of that? Guo Lei tried to push back, slamming the table, calling me a charlatan. So I asked him, mildly, whether he'd seen the hints before he arrived, and used his name and his profession, and watched him flinch. The others were softening, so I handed the envelopes back to their owners, and the moment the letters were in their hands, the belief in the room went total and solid, and I felt something new drop into my head, complete and cold and real. A map. The entire castle. Every floor, every mechanism, every chest, live and updating, showing me where each player was in real time. Jie Kong, sharp as always, asked why there were only 6 of them when the game said 7 players, and I congratulated him on discovering a special rule. There's a 7th, I said, a player who awakened the lone wanderer profession, so he doesn't wake with you. He hides in the castle. Factionless. He doesn't vote. Mei Ling asked if he was human or wolf, and I said his camp has nothing to do with his profession, and smiled, and told them absolutely nothing, because you cannot disprove a man who doesn't exist. Then I gave them the real gift, the one that turned the whole game into a slaughterhouse. When you see me in the castle, I said, you may ask me one question. Where someone is, what their ability is, whether they've killed. And the price for a question is simple. 1 life. For every player you kill, you earn 1 question. And while their clever little minds were still absorbing that this meant even teammates could kill each other for information, I gave them one more hint, not about this game, but about all of it. Clear a game and the survivors split the reward, and the reward is lifespan. 7 years, split, among survivors. I watched the math land behind 6 pairs of eyes. If only 1 player finishes, that 1 player lives 7 more years. If 2 of you split it, that's 3.5 years each. 3.5 years of stable life before you're dragged back into a place like this. And for people whose entire being was one screaming animal desire to not die, 3.5 years was a reason to kill absolutely anyone standing next to them. I pointed lazily at the schedule on the wall and told them the castle itself could eat them if they got lazy, and suggested they get moving. Jie Kang stood, glanced at the schedule, and walked out alone. No mention of pairs this time. One by one they left, and every single one of them kept their distance from everyone else, and I understood the game had changed from a hunt into a free-for-all. Nobody doubted a word I'd said. Why would they? God had just told them their teammates were worthless, and their lives were on a timer. With the map humming in my skull, I didn't waste a second. There was a storeroom on the first floor with an unremarkable brown chest in it, and inside that chest was the single most extreme object in this whole game, the guaranteed hit pistol, the same one that ended up in Feng Yan's hands last time. This time, it ended up in mine. I tucked it into my waistband, and for the first time in either loop, I felt something close to safe. Even Jie Kong bleeds if you shoot him. Then I watched the map turn my little murder engine over. Guo Lei and Songbo's names slid together on the far side of the first floor, and a moment later, Songbo's name simply blinked out. No sneak attack, no advantage. The thief just lost. I strolled over to find Guo Lei panting over the body, having beaten his man down without even a weapon. I congratulated him on the first kill, told him where a wolf chest was hidden under the restroom sink, and answered his one earned question, nearest player, with a veterinarian on the middle stairs. He licked his lips and went. I liked Guo Lei, honestly. A man who is killed will kill again, and that was exactly the man I needed. His name climbed toward Mei Ling's on the map, and then his name blinked out too. Huh, okay, that works. I found his body by the stairs, throat opened, and Mei Ling coming back down toward me with the same dagger she'd carried in both my lives. Fate really is a funny little thing. She asked me a question, which players were still alive, and I checked the map and started listing, and paused because right as I spoke, Feng Yan's name winked out where it overlapped Jie Kang's. Oh, I said, the teacher just died. No standoff to save her this time, because this time she never had the gun. Which left Jie Kong and Mei Ling as the last 2 wolves, Sun Ran hiding somewhere as my one human, and me. An hour into a game where last time nobody died all day. Progress. I went up to the 3rd floor library and found Jie Kong, knocked politely, said hello. Soldier, do you have a question for me? And that's when footsteps came pounding up behind me and Mei Ling's voice cut in, don't ask him anything. She'd found Guo Lei's body, done the arithmetic, and she was smart enough and fast enough to have reasoned her way to something almost true. She looked at Jie Kong and said, the administrator is a player, the lone wanderer doesn't exist. I asked her, honestly delighted how she'd worked it out. And she told me. Her real veterinarian ability wasn't healing small animals, it was talking to them. She'd asked the crows outside 2 questions. Was there an 8th person in the castle? No. And what had the administrator done when the game started? He went straight to a first-floor storeroom and opened a supply chest. Because, she said, why would a god need supplies? It was a genuinely beautiful piece of deduction. She was the smartest one in the game, in either loop, and she'd outthought a fake god using a couple of crows and a lot of nerve. And the wolves' rule that they can't recognize each other meant Jia Kang was now looking at her with far more suspicion than at me. So I did the only thing a fair administrator could do. I raised my hand. The pistol went off, and behind me Jia Kang dropped, the guaranteed bullet finding the one thing on the field I could never beat in a fair fight. And then, before Mei Ling could move, I turned the muzzle on her. There. The most troublesome man in this castle handled myself, and it was easy, except the gun was empty now, 1 bullet, and I'd spent it on the soldier. Mei Ling didn't know that. And a gun makes people lose their nerve even when it's a paperweight, so I kept it level and I kept my finger near the trigger and I waited and she waited and the seconds stretched and she cracked first. Why, she asked, did I do all the reasoning and you shot the soldier and not me? Because, I said, easy as anything, he might have been persuaded by you, and his profession and his nature meant that the instant he might turn hostile, killing him became infinitely more important than killing you. Even if I were 100% sure you hated me, I'd still shoot him first. So I'm being underestimated, she said, and then, narrowing her eyes, you're admitting you're not the administrator. I am indeed not the administrator, I agreed. And then she looked at the gun that hadn't fired, and the thought I'd been dreading crawled across her face. Your gun. Does it only have 1 bullet left? And here was my problem. I had never once lied to her about the bullet count. So Fraudster couldn't help me. I couldn't manifest a second bullet into that cylinder because a manifestation needs a lie, and I hadn't told one. This part was just me and my face and nothing up my sleeve. So I laughed, and I told her the truth wrapped in a dare. Revolvers run out. It's only natural. Want to bet my gun's empty? She took a step closer. Because you haven't fired, she said. I'm starting to doubt you only have 1 shot. You've got no reason to keep me alive this long. Your aim's clearly good. Another step. So I think there's exactly 1 bullet in that gun, and you've already used it. Her reasoning was perfect. She was completely right. And I looked at her with a lazy, pitying smile, the smile of a man holding 4 aces, and I said, brilliant, Mei Ling. You really are the smartest person in this game, but your reasoning is only half right. This gun doesn't have 1 bullet, it has 2, and I'm just deciding whether to save the second one for you or the otaku. I didn't have 2 bullets, I had 0, but I said it with the bored certainty of a man for whom your death is already a scheduling question, and I let her watch me weigh it. She shook her head, took another step, said it out loud. A pistol like that is either a full magazine or a single shot. 2 is just weird. I don't believe you. And she raised the dagger and she charged, betting her life on a piece of logic that happened to be exactly correct. I pulled the trigger. I want to be honest with you about this moment, the way I've been honest about the rest. I pulled that trigger as a pure bluff, expecting a dead click, expecting to have to do something desperate and physical in the next half second, and the gun fired. There was a second round in it after all, one I hadn't counted on, and the bullet took her through the side and put her down. She hit the floor with the dagger beside her, and I walked over and looked at her going, and I sighed, and I told her the truth one last time because she'd earned it. You said you didn't believe I had a second shot, I said, but you did believe it. Just a little. Just enough to hesitate. That's not your fault. It's just that my acting is that good. Because whether or not the gun was loaded, her own eyes had told her I was going to fire without a flicker of doubt, and that certainty had bought the exact half second that killed her. The bullet was luck. The hesitation was me. A few seconds later, the wall lit up. Werewolf faction, eliminated. Game, who is the outsider, complete. I closed her eyes, and the dark took me. The settlement space looked like the void I'd started in, except this time I wasn't alone. Sunran was there, the one human who'd survived by doing his chores and hiding while I burned the whole roster down, and he was already screaming. Why is it 7 days? Why not 7 years? Oh, that. I shrugged. Little white lie, I said, to keep you all from despairing. Sunran wailed that 7 days was barely enough time to finish 1 more anime season, and begged me, as the administrator, to give him more. And I told him, sadly, that I was only God's spokesman, a player with a special title, not a god. Otherwise, why would I be stuck in this waiting room with him? He asked if my reward was bigger at least, and I said, of course, I get double what you do. Which was a fresh lie, and I felt his belief rise around it, though it didn't quite manifest. Interesting. Sunran believed almost anything, but there were limits even to his gullibility, and doubling his lifespan was apparently past them. I kept nudging the number, 10 items, then 6, then just a vague double, feeling for exactly where his belief could carry a lie and where it couldn't. It was good practice. It was honestly kind of relaxing. Then the real numbers came in, the ones that weren't lies. Base reward, 7 days of survival. And because my performance had earned a rating, the system called Total Control, a bonus 1 non-exclusive item from the game, my pick. I chose the guaranteed hit revolver, obviously, and it turned out I got to keep the lie detector too. And Fraudster, of course, came home with me, sharper than before. Son ran off to enjoy his whole entire week of extra life, asked, horrified, whether the lone wanderer had died too, and I paused, because he still believed in a man who never existed, and I told him, gently, yes, the lone wanderer fell to the veterinarian, one clean blow. He shuddered at how ruthless that refined lady in glasses had turned out to be, and I opened my mouth to correct him, because Mei Ling didn't wear glasses, and then I just let it go. Some corrections aren't worth the breath. I wished him luck, told him to cherish his hard-won second chance, and the settlement ended before he could finish complaining that a week wasn't much of a chance at all. I woke up lying in the middle of my own stage. My phone said just past midnight. My chest had no hole in it, and floating in the top corner of my vision, in that same cheerful blood red, was a countdown. Latest start of the next game, 6 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes. So the 7 days weren't a metaphor. There was another one of these coming, every week, forever, like the world's worst subscription. I biked home through the quiet city to the little 2-bedroom flat I share with the only family I've got. It's old and cramped, but it's warm, plants everywhere, a fish tank on the coffee table, and on the wall a photo from last year of a round-faced young woman throwing a huge V sign and hugging a shy, hunched-over version of me. My sister, Wang Ji, she was asleep. The rice cooker was still on keep warm, and there were leftovers under a mesh screen with a note that would, knowing her, contain threats. I unplugged the cooker, went to my room, and was unconscious before I finished lying down. In the morning, there was fresh fried rice and a new note with a little angry face drawn on it, informing me I'd skip dinner again and would be dealt with. I ate every bite. And that day, at the show, I gave the best performance of my life. I'm not exaggerating. My acting had jumped a whole level overnight, and I knew exactly why. Turns out the fastest way to improve is to have someone point a gun at your head and force you to improvise for your life all night long. I'd played a detective. I'd played a man with a rewind power. I'd played a god. Compared to that, a stage is easy. The applause at the end was thunderous, and even the kids who'd only come for class credit were on their feet, and for a second the whole death game felt like it had happened to somebody else. And then, changing backstage, I found a card in my pocket that I had definitely not put there. Black, printed, 2 small silver lines. Welcome back to life, dear senior. My hair stood straight up. Because the card was printed, in reality, only a few minutes had passed since I died on this stage, which meant the girl in the sailor uniform hadn't just shot me. She'd known I'd come back. She knew about the game. She'd been so sure of my resurrection that she'd had a card ready, and under the greeting was a time and a place. Friday, 8 p.m., 9040 Chengming Street in the old part of town, an invitation from my own murderer. I tried out loud to tell my club president about a girl who'd killed me in a death game, and the words simply would not leave my throat. Stuck there like they'd hit a wall. So that part was real too. But whoever this junior was, she was the only thread I had connecting the stage I died on to the castle I'd killed in. I was going to that appointment. I just had a few days to prepare first. My first move was my club president, Gao Rui. She's maybe 5 feet tall on a good day, a junior, the writer and director and president of our little drama club, and the single most infamous student at our university, because in her first year, she hacked the school's academic system to push ads for a club play to every student's phone. Her major is digital media art. She enters programming contests solo and destroys the actual computer science majors from the neighboring universities. She calls me her ace. I told her I needed to find someone, urgently, a possible freshman, and that this was the kind of favor most people couldn't do. She grinned, spat out the pen she'd been chewing, and had every freshman record on her laptop before I finished asking. 2,000 odd girls in the incoming class. I flipped through faces fast, 4 to a page at a glance, and I'd never forget those sharp, bright eyes. I got to the bottom of the list. Nothing. The girl who killed me was not a student at my school. Gao Rui, sensing a mystery, offered to dig deeper, cross-reference other universities, the works. And I told her never mind, because if she pulled on this thread, she might find the person on the other end, and the person on the other end pulls guns on college students in a country where nobody has guns. I wasn't going to hand my one genuinely good friend to a maybe murderer. I'd noticed something about myself since the castle, and I didn't love it. I'd schemed 5 people to death and stabbed 2 of them with my own hands, and it had barely dented me. Murder had quietly moved into the list of things I was willing to consider. Which is a fine mindset for a death game and a terrible one to bring home. So I kept the people I loved on the far side of a wall from all of it. The address turned out to be an abandoned 2-story restaurant, the Jiangcheng Renjia, dead sign, rusted lock. I went a couple of days early to scout because walking into your murderer's chosen meeting spot unprepared is how you become a card in someone else's pocket. I climbed in through a broken window and the inside stopped me cold. Everything was old and derelict, but the tables were arranged, the floor was spotless, recently cleaned. I got out my pistol and my lie detector and found a pillar to hide behind. Footsteps came down the stairs. A large middle-aged man in a beautifully tailored dark blue suit, absolutely dripping gold, watch and rings and necklace, a walking jewelry store. He spotted me before I even peeked. "Come out, little bro," he boomed. "The gathering's not till the night after tomorrow. You're early." I stayed behind my pillar and told him I had no idea what he was talking about. I was just passing through. He laughed and explained something that changed my whole understanding of my new life. "Those of us who've been through the game," he said, "physically cannot say the words to a normal person. Try, and it sticks in your throat. The fact that I can talk to you freely proves you're a player." He was right. The words had stuck for me too. I made him swear on the lie detector that he meant me no harm. He raised his fist, amused, and swore, and the light glowed green, and I came out from behind the pillar. He introduced himself, more or less, as the man who ran things around here. WeChat name, Harmony Brings Wealth. Profile picture, a golden toad that looked exactly like him, and over the next few minutes he cheerfully explained the world I'd fallen into. The gathering was a market. The biggest, most reputable offline meeting point in the city, where players traded items because, and this was the key thing, you can't carry anything into a game but the clothes on your back. No supplies, no weapons, nothing. So a real item, something you pulled out of a dungeon, is worth a fortune. There's a forum, the player's underground network, with its own points that trade 1 to 100 against real money. "And for a newbie like me," he said, eyeing the gun, "there's really only one measure of strength. Item count, a guaranteed hit pistol on your very first game. You're either very lucky or very strong, and I don't think you're only lucky." He sent me the forum installer, told me his ID was my invite code, and warned me kindly that players make enemies because when the stakes are your life, grudges come easy. The gathering was in 2 days. I thanked him and biked home, turning the whole thing over, wondering what the girl who killed me actually wanted, and whether it was as simple as shoving me into this world to see if I'd sink or swim. I found out how much I'd swum the second I opened my front door, when a figure lunged at me out of the dark. My hand was already summoning the pistol against the attacker's stomach when I caught a familiar smell of shampoo, and then a sharp, familiar pain in my ear. The light snapped on. Wang Ji had me by the ear, and her face promised violence. 11 p.m. 2 nights running, she said. "You've really made something of yourself." I begged for mercy. Rehearsal, then a club dinner. Wrong answer. She'd run into my club president at her shop, and there had been no club dinner. Then she noticed the gun in my hand, plucked it off me, and asked with great menace whether I was planning to shoot her. I told her it was a prop I'd brought home from the club to get a feel for, and she'd startled me. It was a good lie. It came easier than it used to, which was another thing I noticed and didn't love, because I couldn't tell her the truth. The throat wall made sure of that, but even if I could have, I wouldn't. My sister is 5 years older than me. Our parents died when I was small, and she dropped out of school and worked and opened a shop and raised me basically single-handed. She is, in every way that counts, my mother. And her one real fear is the news stories about actors who get so lost in a role they can't find their way back out. So I gave her the softest version I had. The role I'm playing is intense life and death stuff. I got too deep into it. I went for a long bike ride to clear my head. I lied because I didn't want you to worry. She melted, of course, from anger straight into worry, which was worse. She told me if acting ever got to be too much, I could quit. She had the shop now. She could support us. And I went to my room feeling like the lowest creature alive because I could butcher 5 strangers in a castle and shrug, but one gentle lie to the one person who loved me, and watching her buy it, sat in my chest like a stone. I didn't spiral about it. I'm not built to spiral. I just filed it under things this stupid game has cost me, right next to my life, and I opened the forum. The forum was a black app with a black icon and a single blank input box, mysterious and minimalist, and honestly, a little pretentious. I typed in Harmony Brings Wealth's ID as my invite, and it welcomed me and asked for an account and a nickname. For the account, I used Stanislavski 1938, after my favorite drama theorist and the year he died, because I am exactly that kind of person. For the nickname, I wanted to type actor, thought better of it, and typed director instead. A few detours never hurt, and then the forum opened up and showed me the whole ecosystem I'd been dropped into. Announcements, discussions, guides, bounties. 3 organizations were pinned to the top, permanently banned from logging in: the Psychological Society, the Freedom Alliance, the Marauders. The Marauders sounded like exactly what they were. The other 2 I couldn't read yet, but a banned list meant the people running this forum weren't neutral, and I wrote all 3 names down. The beginner's guide answered nearly every question I had, and I read it like it was the night before the college entrance exam, because for me, information isn't just useful, it's ammunition. The more I understand this game, the more convincingly I can pretend to be anything in it. So I learned that the prevailing theory is a god built this to give the dead a second chance. That every dungeon you clear buys 7 more days, that the weekly game is inescapable, that somewhere down the line there's a test called rank advancement that splits the strong from everyone else, and that the guide writer wouldn't say more, which told me it mattered. I learned the profession types, enhancement and information, and rule and skill, and the weird catch-all called special, and that professions come in ordinary and unique, and that unique ones almost never repeat and are almost always the strange, complicated, special kind, like a fraudster. And I realized my very first game had shown me one of every type: soldier and homebody, enhancement, teacher, information, thug, rule, thief and vet, skill, and me, the unique one. I learned the dungeon types too: confrontation and survival and puzzle and fighting, and I sat there with my black app glowing in the dark, and I understood that if I memorized enough professions, I could become almost any of them on demand, pick the perfect costume for whatever nightmare the game handed me next. So I started memorizing, all of them, like vocabulary. But information doesn't pay rent, and I had a sister to make things up to. So I came up with a plan to get rich, and the plan hinged on that one rule, the one that makes items worth killing for. You can't bring anything into a game. Not a weapon, not food, not a pen. Which means a single decent item can flip an entire dungeon in your favor, and players will pay stupid money for stupid little things. A good machete item goes for over 100 points. That's tens of thousands of real money for a knife. Now, I wasn't about to sell my guaranteed hit pistol or my lie detector, but I had a unique profession that turns believed lies into reality. So what if the item was a lie? I went to the cheap wholesale market and bought 15 mediocre batons, haggled down to 120 each, which was very nearly my entire savings, plus a bunch of little glass bottles that I filled with food coloring and flavoring. Junk. Complete junk. All I needed was one gullible soul to believe the junk was real, hard enough to kick my ability into gear, and I knew exactly which soul. I had Gao Rui dig up Sunran, my one human teammate, the boy who believed literally anything, and she had his full file in minutes, a high schooler at the city's number 6 school. I biked over, talked my way past the gate as somebody's cousin dropping off homework, and found Sunran where the file could never have told me. In a bathroom, in a corner, 4 boys taking turns kicking him and throwing wet toilet paper at his head while he covered up and took it. Something in me went cold, and then hot. I don't have a lot of hard rules left, but I've got a few, and beating on the weak is on the list. I walked in, and the boys took one look at someone older and scattered, grinning, "Teacher, we were just playing." I let them run. I was there on a fake ID after all. Then I looked at Sunran, wiping his face, and asked why he didn't fight back. He gave me a tired little shrug and said resisting was useless. He couldn't beat 4 of them, and he only had a year and change of high school left to endure. If I had the soldier's power, he said, I'd rebel, but I just got homebody. So I crouched down and asked him a question. What if you had an item strong enough to give you real power? And his eyes changed. If I had an item, he said, how could I let anyone bully me? And I reached into my bag and pressed a baton and a bottle of blue liquid into his hands and told him with complete casual confidence that these were the item baton and the item agility potion, gifts from your administrator. Go on, try them. And I felt his belief rise, absolute and childlike, and I felt my words become true. The junk in his palm shimmered and turned into the real thing, blood red item description and all. First time I ever fired Fraudster in the real world, and it was on a bottle of food coloring. Sunran drank the potion, said it was blueberry flavored and pretty good, which, thanks, I made it, and then he went out into that hallway a different person. I stayed at the sink and washed my hands and listened to the very satisfying sounds of 4 bullies learning a lesson, and when I came out they were on the floor and Sunran was standing over them with his baton telling them, calmly, to avoid him from now on. He thanked me, glowing, and asked if giving him items broke any administrator rules, and I waved it off. They were my personal items, it's fine. And I opened my bag to show him it was full of more. Because the beautiful part, the part he never needed to know, was that every baton and bottle in that bag had just quietly turned real, minted into genuine game items on the strength of one bullied kid's belief. I'd done a good deed and printed money in the same 5 minutes. I felt great about exactly half of that. Friday night came, and the gathering with it. I dressed the way the guides told me to, mask and cap and sunglasses, parked my bike well away, and walked in with the crowd, and the crowd was all doing the exact same thing, faces hidden, moving quiet. Because the 2 big fair organizations, the Forum and one called Order, ran a squad of enforcers to punish players who broke the rules out here in the real world. And even so, nobody trusted it to be enough. I scanned my forum code at the door. Two big hooded men checked me in, slapped a tag reading director on my chest, and told me not to lose it and not to fight. Inside, the derelict restaurant had become a bustling bazaar. Seasoned players had set up stalls on the tables, their wares laid out, buyers drifting and haggling. 15 points for a toolbox, and a student whining that was robbery. It was so profoundly ordinary that all my nerves drained out, because underneath the death and the masks, it was just people selling stuff. So I found a table and laid out my batons and my little bottles and sat down to play the patient merchant. I did not get to be patient. I had barely sat down before a masked young man was leaning over my table asking the price of the batons, and I said 10 points each, cheaper for cash, and his eyes lit up like I'd offered him gold. 10 points. That's 1,000 real money. For a baton I'd paid 124. He said he'd take the lot, and before he could even get his phone out, a man in a fisherman's hat shoved in shouting, 13, cash, no discount, and that was the pin coming out of the grenade. Someone selling weapon items. Only 10 points. Cash accepted. In a heartbeat, the whole room abandoned every other stall and swarmed mine. 15, 17. I want them all. Who doesn't want them all, damn it? And I sat there behind a table getting mobbed, realizing I had wildly, catastrophically underpriced a stick, because to people who'd been through the game, a stick in the right moment is a life, and nobody thinks $1,000 is too much to pay for one more life. Then someone spotted the potions, read the label out loud, agility potion, reaction and movement up 200% for an hour, and the room lost whatever composure it had left. Because Sunran's belief had made every last bottle real and the blood-red official description didn't lie, so there I was, a broke drama student, watching a mob of masked killers bid each other up over my food coloring, thinking, this is the single most profitable acting job I have ever booked. The mob nearly came to blows over my table, and then 2 gold ingots clacked together somewhere above us and the whole room froze. Harmony Brings Wealth came down the stairs in his sharp suit, and half the crowd greeted him like royalty. Tycoon, the man from the forum, the one who runs the gathering. He strolled to my table, praised the chaos, examined a baton, and while he did it, his phone buzzed a private message onto my screen. Newbie, I don't know how you got this many items, but you'd better tell everyone you've got an organization behind you. I got the chill up my spine and took the hint. A lone rookie dumping 30 cheap items is a walking target. So I said out loud that I came from an organization I couldn't name, that the boss needed cash. That's why the low price and the cash sales. And Tycoon nodded like he approved, and then he simply bought the entire stock himself. 25 points a baton, 20 a bottle, cash on the spot, 775 points total, and just like that, I stopped being a spectacle and became one quiet transaction. He was protecting me, and I knew it. He even walked me upstairs to a genuinely luxurious office and paid me in person. 70,000 transferred, and then another 7,500 in crisp new bills pressed into my hand because, he said, he'd noticed my cheap shoes and my young face and figured this was the first time I'd ever held real money, and new bills feel better to count at home. I took the heavy paper bag and thanked him, thoroughly confused about why this gold-plated stranger was being so kind, and left. What I didn't hear was the conversation after I left. His dark-skinned lieutenant asking why he cared so much about one lucky rookie, and Tycoon at the window watching me go, saying the kid had been handed a business card with the gathering's address on it, and that card was the calling card of the Psychological Society top-tier recruitment. A kid the Psychological Society picks, if he doesn't die young, reaches at least the 3rd tier, so invest early. I didn't hear any of that. I just knew a rich man liked me for reasons I couldn't crack, and that not being able to find the reason made me trust it less. I was still riding that high, already planning to buy my sister something nice, when a low laugh came out of the alley behind me. Not bad, Wang Wei, as expected of the one we chose, a figure in head-to-toe black, voice deliberately roughened. He told me cheerfully that he was from the same organization as the pretty girl who'd shot me and left me her card. The Psychological Society, the banned name from the top of the forum. I palmed the pistol in my pocket but didn't draw it, because he was the only lead I had and I couldn't afford him dead. I asked why they'd tried to kill me, and he corrected me, delighted. We didn't kill you to kill you, he said. We killed you to bring you into the game. Our assessment says you have potential, and we don't let talent go to waste. So the girl in the sailor uniform had murdered me the way a scout drafts a player. He wanted to know my profession, called it a further evaluation, and when I refused, he drew a dagger and offered to interrogate it out of me instead. Now, I couldn't tell him about Fraudster, but I'd just spent a week memorizing every profession on the forum, and I knew the one built for exactly this. So I told him my profession was soldier. He scoffed, said his people had investigated me. I was a college student. Nothing about my life, said soldier. And I laughed and asked if he'd never heard of mandatory military training in college, and then I raised a chunk of loose paving stone high over my head, slow enough that he had time to watch, time to wonder, time to believe, and I brought it down full force on my own forearm, and right as it fell, I felt the words take. Because no one cripples their own arm before a fight unless they're absolutely certain it won't break. The brick shattered against my skin and left barely a bruise, and I was, in that instant, a 5-time soldier. He believed the confidence, and the confidence became bone. I clenched my fist and told him it was reasonable for me to want revenge, and asked, politely, for his profession, or else. He smiled, said his was rare too, pulled 2 dark spheres out of his coat, announced ninja, and smashed them on the ground. Smoke everywhere, spicy and blinding, and when it cleared, he was gone. A ninja, in China. He didn't look remotely Japanese. I have no idea what real-life experience awakens ninja, and I suspect the answer is a phone game. I didn't chase. No amount of soldier stops a bullet, and my gun beats his smoke bombs any day of the week. Revenge is a thing you do carefully, in order, over time. But I learned who killed me, the psychological society, and roughly why, and that wasn't nothing. And then, while I was standing there being thoughtful, a very short girl walked straight into me. Round head, a stubby little ponytail, sunglasses, and a mask at midnight. Black windbreaker, hiking backpack, the whole gamer goblin ensemble. She barely came up to my chest, and she immediately started yelling at me for not watching where I was going, which she'd walked into me. I told her so. She blustered, pulled out a box cutter, and warned me to keep my distance because her profession was very powerful. She was a soldier. I looked at the box cutter, which against my currently very real soldier skin was going to do exactly nothing, and I sighed and let her go, because I couldn't be bothered to terrorize a child. She snorted and hurried off, faster and faster, until she was jogging. And it was only when I went to unlock my bike that I discovered my bike and my keys were gone, and in their place sat a shared rental bike with a sticky note on it. Just kidding, it read, in messy handwriting, "I'm not a soldier, I'm a thief." There was a little smiley face on the back. Let me repeat that. I am the fraudster the death game handpicked, top of my acting class, a man who fooled a 5-time soldier into stabbing himself in the chest with belief alone, and I got completely outacted by a teenage pickpocket over a bicycle. There are heroes everywhere in this world, and apparently some of them are 4'10" and named after a memory. The shared bike's chain had been pulled, so it didn't work either, and the note on it added, "With your IQ, you can basically kiss bikes goodbye." I took 3 deep breaths. But she had a conscience of sorts, because one intersection later, my own bike was parked perfectly on the roadside, keys on the seat, next to a note reading, "Haha, just kidding, here's your bike." The lock on it, though, was a stranger's lock, with a final note that just said, "Tee-hee." I punched it open with 5 times a soldier's strength and threw the pieces in the trash and told the empty street that this little thief had better pray I never caught her in a game. Lucky for me, I muttered, I'm a cut above the rest. It was not, in that moment, a convincing performance, even to me. Wang Ji was waiting up when I got home, on the sofa this time, sleeves already rolled up. Before she could launch, I opened my bag and shoved 2,000 in cash into her arms. "It's important, sis. I'm making money." The pink bills wiped the fury clean off her face. She twirled them, checked they were real, and then, unable to fully surrender, accused me of becoming a male escort and warned me to keep myself pure. I assured her I had not taken up escorting. I told her a senior was shooting short videos and had paid me for a cameo, and she believed it instantly and completely because in her eyes, I'm a future superstar, and of course someone would pay to put me on camera. She even asked for the account name, and I told her the videos weren't posted yet, and fled to my room before the lie could develop complications. I made a mental note to actually shoot some videos, so the lie would have somewhere to live. Then I spent the whole weekend and every spare minute at school with my nose in the forum, memorizing professions like a man cramming for finals, because for me, every ability I learn is another mask in the closet. And just after noon on Tuesday, the blood-red words in my vision changed. Less than 24 hours to the next game. Before midnight, find a body of water more than 50 centimeters deep, submerge yourself completely, and wait. That was the entry method, and I'd read enough by then to know they always mimic a way to die. This one was drowning. Fail to do it right, and the game drags you in anyway, and punishes you brutally for it, sometimes fatally. So I was not going to improvise. My sister had once bought a huge wooden bathtub on a whim and used it twice. That night, after she was asleep, I dragged it into the bathroom, filled it, and, guessing that a water entry meant a water dungeon, put on the most tropical fisherman-adjacent outfit I owned in the hope of drawing a helpful profession. Then I climbed in, held my breath, and sank. The last thing I saw before the world went dark was the game announcing itself. Game title, Fatal Quiz. Clear condition, solve the necessary puzzles. Number of players, 5. I came up coughing in a white room the size of a classroom, soaked to the skin, water draining out of holes in the walls faster than it was coming in. 4 other players were hauling themselves up out of the same receding water, hacking and spitting. I did my usual sweep. A dark, muscular man in a blue work shirt and a white safety helmet. A young couple propping each other up. A boy in a gray hoodie and a girl in a pink tracksuit, both radiating fresh out of college. And the 5th player, small black windbreaker, cargo pants, a stubby ponytail, round sunglasses. I knew that outfit. And when the little figure turned her head, and even through the sunglasses, our eyes met, and her mouth fell open in surprise, I was 100% certain it was the bike thief. Of all the people, in all the death games, in all the world, the universe had dropped the bicycle goblin into a locked room with me and a lot of draining water. I started laughing, and it was not an entirely healthy laugh, and I waded straight toward her, cracking my knuckles. She backed away fast, hands up, insisting this was clearly a cooperation puzzle, so there was no need to fight. And I smiled and told her that a couple of broken legs wouldn't affect anyone's puzzle solving one bit, and I meant it about 40%, which was enough. Karma, it turns out, delivers. Sometimes it just makes you wait for a themed room and a good pun first. I pulled the pistol and told her I'd start with the legs, and the bike thief dropped to her knees in the draining water and folded like a lawn chair. Brother, I was wrong. It was a joke. I gave the bike back in the end, and that lock didn't even slow you down. I watched. You smashed it in one go. The 3 other players were now very carefully not making eye contact with the guy who had a gun. I asked her why she'd pranked me in the first place, half expecting some organization had sent her to test me, and she wailed the truth instead. She'd been the one selling speed runes at the market, and some jerk had dumped a pile of better, cheaper agility potions and tanked her whole night's sales, and then she'd spotted that same jerk on the street squaring off with a ninja, and she just couldn't resist. So, in a roundabout way, I'd bankrupted her first. I put the gun away. Fine. We were even. Roughly. We did introductions, because it was clearly a cooperation puzzle. The man in the safety helmet was Uncle Joe, a craftsman, 10 dungeons cleared, which made him a genuine veteran in a world where surviving half a year is rare. The couple were June, a doctor who could heal once a day, and Seven, a student whose ability nudged the odds when there was something to negotiate with, and they'd teamed in together. The bike thief's handle was Buxiao, which means unforgettable, a thief, 3 dungeons. And I, unfortunately recognized, had to admit to being the soldier, so I gave them a borrowed name, Xuan Feng, and said I'd cleared exactly 1. That got a round of stunned looks, because a 1-dungeon rookie isn't supposed to know about the forum or the gathering yet. I smiled modestly and said, just lucky. 7 looked relieved. A newbie in the room, he figured, meant an easy dungeon. Bless his heart. Then the far wall clicked and a door opened and out stepped our examiner. Not a person. A tall thing in a crowhead mask under a cloak of black feathers, speaking in a hoarse voice that sounded like a dozen voices stacked crooked. It welcomed us to the fatal quiz and laid out the rules. 3 rooms, each room, 2 reward and punishment questions, and 1 choice question. Get the choice question right and you advance. Get all 3 choice questions right and you clear the dungeon. Then it flapped its wings, the ceiling opened, water crashed down on us, and it asked the first question. At the current fill and drain rates, how long until this room is completely full? A pool filling problem. Grade school math. 7 immediately started setting up X equals, and Uncle Joe started pacing off the walls to estimate the volume, and everyone got very busy, and I stood there feeling the exact itch I felt in the castle, because a grade school pool problem does not show up in a death game. That crow wasn't a machine reciting a script. It was a mind. It chose what to answer and how. And it had been suspiciously, casually generous about letting our answer be off by 5 whole minutes. So I went and interrogated it. Precise questions, the kind that pin a liar. Do these drains and the wrong door lead to the same void? Is the void part of this room? And it answered yes, yes, and yes, still chuckling, and that told me the answer wasn't a number at all. This room includes the endless void the drains and the death doors empty into. You cannot fill an infinite room, so no matter how long the water runs, this room never fills. The margin of error didn't matter because there was no time to be off by. Correct answer. The crow ate 1 wrong door for us as a reward, and then, as a second reward, cheerfully opened a huge new trapdoor in the ceiling and doubled the water. Because we'd been slow, it explained, and now we'd learned to be fast. A death game's idea of a gold star. Second question, with the water climbing past our waists. It described 3 jobs: cracking a safe, finding a key, throwing a switch, each needing a set number of people and a set number of minutes, and asked, can you guarantee nobody drowns before the trapdoor is shut? Another grade school word problem, time allocation this time, and everyone leapt at it, and Buxiao, who I was rapidly upgrading from bicycle nuisance to alarmingly sharp, spotted a trap in the wording, that the crow never said we had to finish all 3 jobs. Nice. But wrong, and I said so, because the real trap wasn't in the words at all this time. It was on the wall. The 3 jobs were locked in a chain. The safe held the tool to reach the key opened the lock on the switch. You had to do all 3 in order 37 minutes total, and in 37 minutes, every one of us drowns. So the honest answer was the ugly one. No, we cannot guarantee nobody dies. Correct again. The lesson of the first room was becoming clear. The math was never the point. The math was the costume the trap wore. The choice question in the first room was a classic dressed up to kill us. 4 colored doors, 1 safe, the rest opening onto the void, pick one together. The crow, as a reward we'd earned, promised that after our first pick it would open a door we didn't choose and let us switch. Buxiao and I said it at the same time. The 3-door problem. Monty Hall. Switch and your odds go from 1 in 3 to 2 in 3. The 2 college students and the construction veteran stared at us like we were speaking in tongues, and there was no time to teach a probability seminar with the water at our chests, so we picked red. The crow opened yellow onto a screaming waterfall of void, and everyone nearly got swept into it, and Buxiao, too light to hold the floor, actually did start to go. I crossed the room in 2 soldier strides and grabbed her by the collar and hauled her back, and she clung to my arm and thanked me, and then immediately tried to declare us a couple, and I told her to get lost, and did not actually make her let go. But before we switched to blue, I stopped everyone, because 2 in 3 still meant a 1 in 3 chance of dying, and that is a deeply stupid way to die, and it did not feel like this room's style. This room hid its traps in plain sight, and that was the tell. It was never a 3-door problem. Before the crow opened yellow, there had been 4 doors, not 3, and the whole time the crow only ever promised to lead us through a door, never one of the 4 on the walls. And the reward from question 1, that giant trapdoor in the ceiling gushing water, was a door 2, a door with water coming out of it, which meant it did not open onto the airless void. I looked up and told the crow I choose the black door, the one above us, and its eyes gleamed and it said, as expected, I admire you. It spread wings wider than the room had any right to hold, scooped all 5 of us up, and flew us straight up through the ceiling into the second room, while the 2 college students wore the identical expression of people who have decided to stop asking questions and simply follow the terrifying man with the gun. The second room was pitch black, lit by 2 candles, and the examiner had vanished because a crow made of black feathers is very hard to see in the dark, which was, I suspected, the joke. Its voice came out of nowhere. Same structure, 2 reward questions and a choice, except in here you don't ask me questions, you ask specific creatures and you get a limited number. 2 crows landed on the candlesticks, and between us and the far darkness hung 3 swaying rope bridges, 1 safe, 2 rigged to drop you into the void at the middle. And the 2 crows, the voice explained, were gods. One always tells the truth. One always lies. Both answer only yes or no questions. You get 2 questions. 7 lit up, because he'd read this one in a magazine. Ask either crow what the other would say, and you invert your way to the answer. He marched over, full of confidence, and asked the crow on the left, in a perfectly good logic puzzle sentence, what the other crow would say about the left bridge, and the crow looked at him, and said, "Coo, coo, not yes, not no, coo." 7's soul left his body, and in the dark, Buxiao started laughing, because of course. The examiner never said the crows would answer yes or no. It said they answer yes or no questions. They're crows. They say crow things. I'd clocked it the second 7 started walking over, and Buxiao had clocked that I'd clocked it from the exact phrasing I'd used correcting his question earlier, which was the moment I stopped thinking of her as a pickpocket and started thinking of her as a problem. But a crow that says coo is still a crow that's consistent. Ask the same crow about all 3 bridges, and its 3 answers will be 2 of one sound and 1 of another. So I asked the left crow about the far right bridge, got a caw, different from the coo it had given before, which meant one of those 2 bridges was the safe one, 50-50. Not great, and here finally was the real difference between room 1 and room 2. In the first room we all answered together, as one unit. In this room, you answer with your body. You cross a bridge, which means we didn't all have to gamble. Only one of us did. So I pulled the gun and pointed it at Buxiao. Congratulations, Miss Thief, you're up. She protested loudly that she had the fewest dungeons and I was picking on her, and I agreed cheerfully that yes, she had the fewest dungeons, and yes, she genuinely offended me, and she was the softest persimmon on the branch, so off she went. But I had Uncle Joe tie his safety rope around her, and I wrapped the other end twice around my fist and held it. Uncle Joe, watching, told me quietly that I'd taken on real risk to save her a fall, that I was playing the villain so nobody else had to. June and 7 looked at me with something close to gratitude, and I told them the truth, which was less flattering than their version. I didn't tie the rope only to keep her alive. I tied it so that if a resentful little thief reached the far side of a safe bridge and decided to stay silent, or fake a scream, or the far side happened to be soundproofed, I'd still feel the tug through the rope and know. Kindness and control, same knot. Buxiao gave me the finger, walked out into the dark on the left bridge, and a moment later the rope went taut and her voice came back. This one's fine. This is it. The far side had 5 bridges instead of 3, and now 3 crows because the examiner had added a third god, one representing change, that might tell the truth or might lie, mood dependent. Everyone turned to me, and this time I had 5 questions and a plan that didn't require anybody to walk a plank. I burned the first question just to nail down the crow's vocabulary, having Uncle Joe ask the middle crow a question I already knew the shape of, purely to confirm that ku still meant yes. It did. After that, it was bookkeeping. I sent June to the right-hand crow, then 7, each with a sentence I wrote out word for word and made them recite exactly, not one word off, because in a game where people die over phrasing, you do not let 7 freelance. Question by question, I fenced the change crow out and cornered the truth crow, and by the 4th answer I knew which bridge was safe without anyone risking a step. And then Buxiao, who'd been shadowing my logic the whole time, jumped ahead and announced the answer before I could, smug as anything. The far right crow is truth. Ka means no. The second bridge from the right is safe. You don't even need the last question, Xuanfeng. And she was right. She'd tracked every step. So naturally, I told her she was an idiot, because what if the crows ku and ka had swapped meanings between my first question and now? This is a game where people die, so I burned my last question to check, and it turned out the 4th bridge from the left was the safe one after all, and she'd have walked us all off a cliff on her cleverness. She called me a bastard for enjoying it. I did enjoy it. The 3 normal people watched the 2 of us bicker our way across a death bridge and quietly agreed, with their eyes, to never fully understand what was happening and simply be grateful it kept working. The last room came wrapped in gray fog, and the crow told us there'd be no reward and punishment questions here, only one choice, and the choice was cruel. It made 5 statements about us, and each of us had to name one as a lie and prove it. Statement 1. Nobody faked their profession. 2. Nobody lied about their dungeon count. 3. Nobody lied about their profession. 4. The couple never betrayed each other. 5. None of you ever wished the other dead. 5 neat little knives, one aimed at each of us, and I understood the theme now. Room 1 was cooperation. Room 2 treated survivors as a resource. Room 3 was designed to make us cut each other open. Uncle Joe went first, and to prove his lie, he peeled off his whole disguise. His forum ID wasn't Craftsman the Nice Veteran. He was a wanted man. June recognized him from the bounty board, a member of the Marauders, one of the 3 banned organizations, wanted by order for killing 5 players in the real world, 8,000 points on his head. 7,000 points, 700,000 in cash. I did the math and nearly wept, because that was a new shop for my sister. That was years of not needing a job. That was my whole life solved, and I'd spent the entire dungeon being nice to it. He wasn't offended by my calm, though. He said he admired me, offered me a slot in the Marauders, and when I politely declined and said I'd like to spend a couple more days on the forum first, he just smiled, took his key, and left through the white door. I'd never once believed the nice uncle act. His acting was bad. It's always the acting. Then the couple detonated. The crow's 4th statement, that they'd never betrayed each other, and 7, the timid student, cracked and confessed he cheated a year ago, and June, the gentle doctor, went cold in a way that put frost on my spine. It came out in pieces, the lies, the ex-girlfriend, the trip that got them both killed, him snarling that she was a controlling psychopath, and he'd never asked to be saved, her listening to all of it with eyes going from cold to bottomless. The crow gave 7 a key. June watched him walk toward the exit, and then Buxiao, the bike thief, sidled up beside her with her box cutter clicking open and murmured, "This is a death game, and didn't you just now, when he was defending that woman, when he was throwing your love back in your face, didn't you have exactly one thought?" And June took the knife. The 5th statement was that none of us ever wished the other dead, and June proved it a lie at the door and came back wiping her face and handed the blade back with a quiet thank you and left through the white light looking, for the first time all game, at peace. I'm not going to describe the middle part. You can fill it in. It's a death game. Which left me and Buxiao, and I looked at the little thief who just talked a heartbroken woman into a killing with 3 sentences and reconsidered her entirely. She grinned, told me to choose first, and I told her to go ahead. She should take the dungeon count lie, since she obviously hadn't only cleared 3. Caught, she admitted it cheerfully. 12 dungeons, 3 months, and that showing weakness just helps a thief work. She'd even lifted my items to check. I patted my pockets in a panic, and she waved Uncle Joe's stolen hammer at me, laughing, because of course she'd robbed the wanted man on her way out. She took a second key off Seven's body, because there was never only one key. That's why she'd nudged June into the murder, and she blew me a goodbye and left. And I stood there in the fog with a spare key in my hand and did the one thing the crow absolutely did not expect. I said I wasn't leaving, because every choice question in this place worked the same way. The real answer was never one of the options laid in front of you. And I'd figured out the examiner's tell rooms ago, so I turned to it and said plainly that its acting was worse than the thief's and that I'd seen through all of it. It laughed, delighted, and called me by my real name, Wang Wei, which it should not have known. I'd cracked its language back in the dark room. A single caw at the start of a sentence marked a lie. A double caw marked a truth. Every rule it had recited I'd been quietly sorting into true and false the whole time, which is a thing you can do if you have an actor's memory for lines, and I do. So I knew this wasn't the last room. I knew there were more questions, and when I pushed, the crow's second question was the vicious one. Who designed this dungeon? Say his name. An unanswerable question, the kind a cheater asks to win. Except this whole dungeon had been traceable start to finish, which meant even this had a buried answer. So I asked the crow its own name, and it refused, which told me everything. It wasn't just the examiner, it was the designer. A creature that builds a perfect nesting box of traps is a narcissist, human or not, and I'd been feeding its ego with little compliments in every room just to confirm it. Its name had already appeared in the game, in full, and in the dark room it had introduced 2 crows as gods, and then 3 crows as gods, and a narcissist doesn't call other gods great, so they weren't 3 gods. They were 3 faces of one. Truth, falsehood, change. I gave it its name, more or less in that order, and told it not to fuss about the exact wording, and it laughed a real, human laugh for the first time. And then it took its mask off, and under the crow hood was my own face. There's a second answer to who designed this, it said, in my voice now. Wang Wei. Me, 10 years from now. I cracked this game, became a god, and came back to help my younger self get stronger, faster. It knew my profession. It knew everything I'd done in the first dungeon. It offered to take me up the stairs and hand me everything I'd need to become a god myself, and all I had to do was believe, and I almost did. 70, 80%, honestly, because it knew so much. And then future god me got offended when I hesitated and threw a little fit about how suspicious I was, veins standing out, voice cracking with rage. And that's where he lost me. Because I've spent my whole life on that emotion, anger at being doubted, and his was garbage. The eyebrows trembled too hard. The pitch jumped too fast on the last syllable. It was the anger of a man who read about anger in a book. So I told him flatly that a god who couldn't outact a teenage pickpocket was not my future self, and I asked whether, after 10 years, I'd really forgotten how to immerse in a role, and I gave him a 2-second demonstration of what furious at being doubted actually looks like, and then dropped it and said, "At least act it to that standard, Your Majesty." He clapped, dropped the future self bit entirely, and cleared the fog, and I saw the real staircase the whole illusion had been hiding, and I climbed it, because the true door is never the one they point at. The god of change had just been a much bigger, much older crow wearing my face as its favorite prank. The room at the top was a viewing platform in the sky, walls of curved crystal, clouds and enormous things swimming in them, and a gray crowman statue 100 meters tall. The inverted tower, it called this place, and told me my second dungeon had earned me a bonus level, where even the questions were rewards because there's no point testing someone who's already seen through everything. And then it asked me 3 of them. Why is your profession fraudster? It asked, and not actor. And the question itself was the gift, because there's a real actor profession on the forum, and I should have gotten that one, and I never understood why I didn't. The answer, I worked out aloud, is potential and gods. The dying words of the girl who shot me, "May you be seen by the gods," weren't raving. They were a prophecy taking effect. The voice that praised me when I rewound time wasn't in the room, it was in my soul. Most players awaken a profession from their ordinary life, but a few, the ones with enough potential to catch a god's eye, get pulled out of the pile and handed a unique one. I'd been playing a different game than everyone else from the very first second. The crow gave me 85 out of 100, said my conclusion was wrong in ways I'd have to find out myself, and moved on before I could push. The reward for that question was a secret, anyone's, my pick. And I thought about the girl who killed me, and I thought about Buxiao. And I chose Buxiao because I could already halfway reverse engineer the assassin on my own, but the thief was a genuine blank, and because I no longer believed for 1 second that she'd wandered into my dungeon by chance, and the crow confirmed it. Buxiao was Freedom Alliance, another of the 3 band names. She'd bought her way into my game with an item to evaluate whether I was worth recruiting, which meant that in the span of 2 dungeons, all 3 of the forum's blacklisted organizations had come sniffing at me. The Psychological Society killed me into this, the Marauders offered me a chair, and the Freedom Alliance sent a goblin to steal my bicycle as a job interview. My potential, apparently, was a problem. The last choice was 2 items in the giant statue's outstretched hands, a cog of prophecy and a tongue of deceit, and they were built for me like a tailored suit. The tongue makes your next possible lie simply come true, no believer required, fraudster with the safety off. The cog makes your next statement of established fact impossible to disbelieve, and I'd learned in the castle exactly how deadly a guaranteed truth can be when you hide a lie inside it. I was told to pick one, So I asked to test drive the cog first, and the crow, curious, agreed, and even promised the cog's effect would work on it, a god, which was the whole trap, and it walked right into it, because narcissists love to watch clever people perform. I activated the cog and stated a fact, that I received double item rewards in every dungeon thanks to my administrator ability. Every word of it technically true, since I really had doubled my haul once by conning Sun Ran, and the cog made the god believe the shape of it, doubled forever, all dungeons, and in the space between the two rewards it owed me, the tongue of deceit floated down and merged into my mouth too. I took one item and used it to steal the other, and a permanent buff besides. The god stared, then laughed, and said I was the first person who'd ever dared use the gods like a mark, and then, because gods are gods, it brought a hand the size of a mountain down on me to say goodbye. I didn't flinch. I'd already won. You don't look away at the end of your best scene. The god didn't kill me. I woke in the settlement space with 2 items bound to my soul, the cog of prophecy and the tongue of deceit, 7 more days on my clock, and the 3 survivors standing around looking variously murderous and tired. I made a point of scowling at Buxiao, keeping my irritable soldier costume on, telling her I regretted not managing to trap her in the dungeon forever. She laughed and promised to keep pestering me, and I promised that next time I might just kill her, and she said with genuine delight, "Then I'll wait and see." And the settlement ended, and I stood up out of a wooden bathtub of lukewarm water in my own bathroom, dripping and alive. What I didn't see was the debrief on the other side. A girl by a swimming pool in a villa on the edge of the city, wet windbreaker on the tiles beside her, typing up her assessment of 1 Xuanfeng, profession soldier, impulsive and vengeful but meticulous, unusually good at reading rules and building traps, potential rated somewhere up in the frightening letters. She dropped it into an 11-person group chat that lit up like a slot machine, a whole organization of famous strangers arguing about whether to grab me now or wait for me to survive my rank advancement, whether the psychological society or order would poach me first, and whether the fact that I'd called myself Xuanfeng meant I was connected to the city's administrator. Their leader promised the thief a rare pair of gloves for the trouble. She turned off her tablet, very pleased with her new gloves and, in spite of everything, hoping the annoying boy passed his trial. I didn't hear any of that either, but I was starting to feel it, the weight of a lot of eyes I couldn't see. Back in reality, I toweled off and checked my countdown, and it had changed. 6 days and change until the next game, same as always, but with a new line underneath. Note: you will receive an additional Ascension trial in your next dungeon. Ascension trial, rank advancement. The thing the forum went strangely quiet about. The thing half the bounty posts were secretly begging for help surviving. I'd been meaning to ask about it eventually. Now it was next week's homework. So I did the reasonable thing and messaged the one player I halfway trusted, Tycoon, who invited me back to his restaurant, dropped a metal ladder out the second-floor window, and brewed me tea like a benevolent uncle while I performed a nervous rookie who'd had a scary dungeon. I told him I'd run into people from the Marauders and the Freedom Alliance, and watched his whole face go serious. The craftsman he waved off, Marauders, wanted, but from out of province, not my problem. The girl, though, when I described her, small, sunglasses, windbreaker, a thief with a rotten personality and a local accent, he named her before I finished, Master Thief Li Hua, the Divine Thief. And that's when the bicycle pranks stopped being funny, because Tycoon explained that her ability doesn't just borrow items, it takes them permanently out of the game and into reality, gone for good. There are many thieves, he said, but only one Divine Thief. She was Freedom Alliance, and the Freedom Alliance was the strangest of the band 3, only 9 members. But every one of the 9 was a monster because their single membership requirement was that you'd survived rank advancement and come out the far side genuinely strong, which was my opening, so I played dumb and asked what rank advancement actually was. And Tycoon told me, most players hit it around their 9th or 10th dungeon when the game decides they're ready. A rare talent gets it at the 7th. It's a dungeon where you're handed an extra optional task on top of survival, and whether or not you attempt the task, the whole game gets viciously harder for you specifically. Survive it, complete the task, and you stop being an ordinary player. You become tier 1. You get an exclusive item, which is really a second ability bolted onto your profession, tuned to work with the first, the two together worth far more than the sum. There is, he said, a qualitative gap between players who've done it and players who haven't. And then he told me not to get ahead of myself because I was a long, long way from my rank advancement. I smiled and agreed and kept my face perfectly still because my rank advancement was in 6 days. On my 3rd dungeon, Tycoon had just told me the earliest anyone reaches it is the 7th and called that a once-in-a-generation genius. I was arriving 4 dungeons ahead of the genius bracket, and I made a decision on the spot that this fact was going into a vault and never coming out. I'd already collected 3 ominous organizations with 2 games played. The last thing I needed was to hang a sign around my neck reading rarest specimen alive. Then Tycoon, because he'd been building to it the whole time, made his pitch. join my organization. The Jianghan Hall, 100 members, his own creation, a partner of the Great Order, powerful enough that within this city, he could shield me from the Marauders and the Freedom Alliance, and even the Psychological Society. It was honestly a good offer from the most trustworthy man I'd met in this whole poisoned world. And I gave him my very best 3 parts doubt, 3 parts flattery, 4 parts disbelief expression, and I told him I'd think about it, because I liked him. And because I'd also clocked, back at the gathering, the exact microsecond his eyes had recognized the business card I'd been handed, which meant he'd known from the start I was Psychological Society bait, and had befriended me anyway, and still hadn't told me. Everybody in this world was playing a longer game than they showed, even the nice ones, especially the nice ones. Before I left, Tycoon showed me the leaderboard, because he couldn't resist. The forum ranks the top 100 players in the country, and Tycoon was 27th, which he announced with the studied humility of a man who very much wanted me to be impressed. I was, a little. The top 3 were monsters with names like General and Diviner and Grandmaster, most of them flying the banner of Order, the big righteous heavyweight of this whole underworld. And I looked at all of it and told Tycoon, honestly, that I'd rather join Order than his little local outfit, which made him laugh and immediately start listing the perks of the Jianghan Hall instead. Discounts on items, a free team item every month, and then the one that actually hooked me, an internship stamp and a real job after graduation at his family's listed catering company, the one whose milk every kid in this city grew up drinking, full benefits, $10,000 a month, no sales quotas, and, he winked, no actual need to show up. For one long, warm second, I pictured my sister bragging to the whole neighborhood that her little brother had a stable job at a real company, and my heart genuinely wobbled. Then I said I'd think about it, and I left. And outside, my face went flat again, because I was never going to join. Not the Jianghan Hall, not Order, not anyone. A man whose entire power is being whoever you need him to be cannot afford real teammates. The more anyone knows me, the more I'm worth to them dead. I had already made my peace with it. Until the day I could change faces at will and vanish, cooperation was the absolute most I'd ever offer anyone, no matter how nice they were, and Tycoon was very nice, which only made me trust him less. I did have Gao Rui pull files on both of them, though, because turnabout is fair play. Tycoon came back a sentimental rich kid who'd bombed a business out of loyalty to useless friends and kept the failed restaurant out of nostalgia, exactly the kind of man you can trust a little and steer with feelings. And the bike thief came back too, because I described her closely enough. Sun Jia, a private school sophomore, both parents famous professors, the kind of overachieving good girl at home that turns feral the second nobody's watching. Her stealing wasn't survival. It was a hobby, and probably a scream. Good to know. Everything's a lever if you know where the person is soft. What I did not know, could not have known, was that my own best friend, my club president, was sitting in a cold underground room full of monitors watching me on one of a dozen screens, murmuring to herself that her dear ace had become the most interesting variable in the whole city. But that's a problem for a different episode. A week went by. Midterms, a group project, my old acting professor deciding we were all going to read the complete works of Shakespeare, a promo video Gao Rui finally bullied me into recording, and then Tuesday, and the countdown, and a new entry requirement. Put yourself in a below-zero environment before midnight. The bathtub trick was out because the refrigerator lived in the dining room and my sister would absolutely drag me out of it by my ear, so I planned it like a heist. The school's third canteen, contracted out, remote, closes late, and crucially, secures its back door with a padlock that's basically decorative. I cased it at lunch, texted my sister that I was pulling an all-nighter on a group project, spent the evening genuinely moved by a Midsummer Night's Dream in the library, and at midnight let myself into the canteen, found the dumpling stall's big walk-in freezer, and set a timed message to Gao Rui reading "Help, I'm stuck in the canteen freezer" to fire in 50 minutes in case I couldn't get out. Then I climbed in among the frozen dumplings, in a coat I'd swiped from the drama club, and let the cold pull me under. I am, I want to note, the only death game player in history who entered a dungeon by voluntarily freezing next to a bag of pork buns. Blood text, game title, Winter Mountains, clear condition, survive 7 days, players, 13, and then far more red text than I'd ever seen wriggling across my vision. My Ascension trial had loaded. Task 1. Tell each player a different contradictory lie and manifest each one with your Fraudster ability. Every lie must stay unexposed until the game ends. 12 players, 12 lies, all contradictory, all real, none caught. Task 2. Find the hidden trickster in this game and expose its scam. And a note at the bottom, almost kind. Completion is optional. I actually laughed, alone in the snow. Of course it was optional. And of course, for a fraudster, it was the single most on-brand exam the universe could have written. 12 people, 12 masks, one slip, and it all comes down. This wasn't survival. This was my final audition. I woke on a cot in a half-collapsed cabin buried in snow, wind screaming, ice needling my face, and a big weathered prospector by the door delighted I hadn't frozen. An NPC, and a helpful one. He warned me about the mountain's real terror, a monster called Chait, said no one who'd seen it had lived to describe it, and that the only defenses were firelight and never traveling in groups of more than 2 because Chait hunts clusters. He gave me a map dense with color-coded outposts and told me the treasure here was black oil, fuel, and medicine both, always found in chests, always worth a fortune. Then he wished me luck and trudged off east and told me not to follow. So naturally I followed, because a survival game where everyone scatters is a nightmare for a man who needs to personally lie to 12 of them before anyone dies, and I couldn't very well chase him down on foot in a blizzard, so I told him a lie to make it possible. I claimed I was a professional surveyor, hired to remap these outposts and mark the dead ones, and that I knew the whole map by heart. He didn't believe me, so I recited it. Every outpost, every neighbor, every valley, cold and exact, because remembering pages is the one thing an actor never has trouble with, and in his head the logic clicked shut. He memorized a map, therefore he's a surveyor, and belief flooded off him, and my legs went light, and suddenly I could walk on snow like it was pavement. First lie, first manifestation, and I hadn't even met a player yet. This trial was going to be fun, because that's the secret I'd figured out in the castle and confirmed here. Fraudster doesn't care if your lies contradict each other. As long as 2 lies never get caught in the same room, they can both be true at once, which meant task 1 wasn't just possible, it was a shopping trip. 12 lies wasn't a burden, it was 12 professions, and I was going to wear all of them at the same time. So I went hunting, and I collected them like a man clearing a buffet. To a matchmaking auntie of a trader, I was a fair-skinned soldier from the army's culture troop, which she believed so hard she immediately tried to set me up with her daughter, and which earned me the location of a black oil torch that would keep monsters off me at night. To a jumpy kid in a marshmallow coat, I was a harmless fellow homebody. To a preening businessman in designer snow gear, I was an English tutor, and I sold it with one clean line of Shakespeare in a flawless London accent. Lord, what fools these mortals be, and walked away wearing the teacher's ability and the first real clue of the game, that Chait is not alive, and that traveling alone doesn't prevent it, only lowers your odds. To a terrified woman guarding her roasted potatoes, I did not play nice. I played a snarling thug, spat on her floor, bullied my way to 2 potatoes, and pocketed the rule breaker's power on my way out the door. A veterinarian who wanted to chat with the Yetis, a thief just looking for a snack, a reporter, a coder, a postman, a chef, an office drone who could switch off his own fear. 12 different men, 12 different voices, 12 different lies, each one landing, each one true. The trickiest was a real detective, a smug 16 dungeon veteran in a red beanie who insisted on guessing my profession before I could speak, and guessed security guard, gloriously wrong. I braced for the hardest sell of the night. He turned out to be the easiest mark of them all, so eager to be right that when I told him I was a doctor on a night shift, he congratulated himself for having reasoned that I worked nights. Turns out awakening a detective profession does not make you a detective, it just makes you a guy who read too many mysteries. By dawn I had all 12, soldier's strength and postman's speed and chef's eyes that could see the food buried in the snow, and I moved through that blizzard like I owned it, one man wearing an entire cast. But something was wrong with this dungeon, and it had been gnawing at me since the first hour. The prospector who woke me up, the helpful NPC with the map, I found him again by a rock a few hours later, frozen solid, dead, and dead a while, dead before he'd ever handed me that map. So who had I been talking to? The food buried in the snow was alive, vegetables and cookies crawling slowly under the frost. Chait was, per the teacher's intel, not alive. And the map itself was too perfect, 97 outposts falling into a flawless circle divided into 12 neat sectors. Nothing in this mountain was what it said it was, which, for a professional liar, felt less like a threat and more like meeting family. The center of that circle had a cabin that didn't match the others, not a bare survival shack, a home. A made bed, a wardrobe of slim men's coats, a wine cabinet whose handle was new, and a bookcase whose handle was worn smooth, which told me the owner drank rarely and read every night. A scholar, alone in the ice. And his books had English titles that translated to nonsense, the principles of happy mechanisms, the especially angry gear, every illustration inside blacked out in careful, deliberate ink. Nobody destroys a beloved book by neatly censoring it, which meant the blacking out wasn't destruction, it was a message. I was still turning that over when the door banged open and the real Kalen walked in, the detective from last night, 16 dungeons, red beanie, and immediately I knew he was real because I'd shot the fake one an hour earlier. The fake Kalen had melted when the guaranteed bullet hit it into a puddle of black oil that soaked into the floor, which is not a thing players do. That was Chait wearing a face it had copied from someone I'd already met, an imitation that could only mimic what it had seen. And when I laid the map on that scholar's desk and connected the outpost sector by sector, the arcs drew letters, and the letters spelled a word, and the word was cheat. The hidden 13th wedge of the map had been erased specifically so nobody would connect the C. The monster's name wasn't Chait, it was Cheat. And my second trial task, find the trickster and expose the scam, suddenly had a target the size of a mountain. Kalen, it turned out, was the best worst detective I've ever met. Henan accent, ear flap hat, the demeanor of a man who wandered in from a bus stop, and a mind like a scalpel. He told me the most important thing a detective can have isn't reasoning, it's knowledge, a little bit of everything, and then he proved it by pushing on the scholar's workbench and announcing it was balsa wood, too light a grain to be that heavy, therefore not wood, therefore hollow, therefore burn it. So I burned it, and under the ash was a metal safe with a combination lock, and inside 8 blacked out books was a puzzle. Page numbers sorted into 4 secret categories, torn pages fitted together like a jigsaw to spell out 4 huge digits 9457. Kalen figured the order from the difficulty and publication dates of the textbooks, insisting on 5497, and the lock clicked open on 5497, and I have never enjoyed being right alongside someone so much. Inside was a file. An ID card, Arthur Finch, independent researcher, clearance B3, and a notebook that read like a man losing his mind, one entry at a time. A leak, he wrote. There shouldn't be a leak. There's no one alive here. Bad dreams. Corpses with no trace of a soul left in them. A monster called Chait. And near the end, the handwriting gone jagged. This is an error we created. And then, on the last used page, I understand now. I know how to deal with Cheat. And then nothing. I should mention that Chait had almost gotten me by then, and I hadn't even noticed. I'd laid down for a 15-minute nap and woken in a dream, watching that first prospector, alive, freeze to death in his sleep with a silent scream frozen on his face, killed by nothing you could see. Chait doesn't tear you apart. It reaches into your sleep, builds you a nightmare you can't escape, and scares you to death. I felt the fear start to crawl up my throat, and I clamped the corporate drone's ability down over it, the dull gray office worker calm that strangles every emotion, and my head cleared, and a voice in the snow told me I was the smartest one here and begged me to end all of this, and I woke up on the cot exactly when I'd told myself to, a monster that kills with fear. And me, a man whose whole profession is convincing people to feel things that aren't real. If you'd designed an enemy specifically for me, you could not have done better. I recruited the real Kalen the honest way, which is to say at gunpoint, because he was an armchair detective who did not want to leave his warm cabin, and I needed his brain. Once he understood there was a genuine mystery, though, he stopped needing the gun. This man had a whole system of hats, a wool cap for sleep mode, heavy ear flaps for energy-saving mode, and when he finally took the dungeon seriously, a straw hat for full power mode, which he announced out loud like a transformation sequence. I told him he was ridiculous. He solved every problem I put in front of him. Both things stayed true the whole time. The dreams kept coming, and in them Arthur Finch's ghost showed me things. His own death, digging up soulless corpses in the snow, breaking down when his instrument read 0. A cave he'd unlocked with a metal key. And when I woke and went looking for that cave with Kalen, we found a blank rock wall exactly where the dream said a door should be, except the snow packed into its cracks never melted when I held the torch to it. Frozen mid-frame, a wall that wasn't a wall. So I did the thing I'd learned an hour earlier, and I set it on fire, and the rocks softened and darkened and ran, melting into the same black oily paste the fake Kalen had melted into, and burned away, and behind it was the real cave, and a round metal door. The whole mountain, it turned out, was partly made of the same stuff, fear shaped into rock. You can lie with geology, apparently, if your medium is a substance that becomes anything a mind expects. Down the tunnel, it stopped pretending to be a primitive world at all. Metal floor plates glowing faint blue, cold light strips in the stone, 50 meters underground a factory the size of a town, half drowned in a lake of black oil, and at its center one machine still beating like a heart, pumping more oil up through the mountain with every pulse. And there Arthur Finch's ghost finally told us the whole thing, and it was worse than a haunting. He worked for the Truth Corporation, a giant of a distant cyberpunk city that had built its empire on a technology that turns human emotion into physical matter, fuel, and building material both. Joy and sorrow at first, then forbidden, fear oil, the most powerful of all, the best fuel, the most versatile material, able to fake life itself, and worse, to trap the souls of the dead. They built this base out in the wastes, spread a rumor about treasure in the mountains, lured superstitious townsfolk in, and terrified them for their fear the way you'd tap trees for sap. The Chait Project. And then the fear got too dense and started killing and eating souls, and the executives dismissed it as a malfunction right up until it killed them too, and now the leftover ocean of stolen souls and terror had congealed into a thing one step short of a real living mind, and that last step was more souls, which was us. Kalen, it emerged, had spent the entire dungeon convinced I was a senior agent of the Psychological Society, the lunatics who'd murdered me into this game, because I hid everything, read people like charts, healed his burn like someone who'd studied psychology instead of medicine, and moved between dungeons like management. When he finally said it out loud, I nearly threw the torch at him. I thought you were one of those psychos. I thought you were one of those psychos. We stood in a soul-powered doomsday factory and yelled the same sentence at each other. And then, God help me, he decided that made us kindred spirits. And I didn't have the heart to argue because it turned out I liked the idiot. Then the heart machine flared and Chait made its move. It slammed on its dream maker to drag every surviving player into one shared nightmare and devour us all at once. The final harvest it needed to be born. Kalen dropped where he stood. I didn't. Because a forced sleep field is, when you squint at it, just a rule, and I'd spent a week memorizing the forum's guide to rule-type professions, and one of my 12 stolen faces belonged to a man whose ability let me edit a rule's scope. So I edited myself out of it. And Arthur Finch stared at me still standing, and I told him the truth, that killing this thing did nothing for me. My trial only asked me to find the trickster and expose the scam. I'd done both. I owed the dead townsfolk sympathy, and exactly no more risk than that. If the other players died in the dream, they died, which was mostly a negotiating position. I did want the monster dead because I couldn't stay awake in the cold for 40 more hours, and I wasn't going to gamble my life on it forgetting me. But I let Arthur Finch think I might walk until he offered me everything I actually wanted to scramble the other player's dream so my 12 contradicting lies could never compare notes and an indestructible notebook on top. Deal. And here I paused to tell a dying man the thing he needed to hear, that his gentleness had made him weak, that recoiling from any sacrifice in the face of a soul-eating monster was not kindness, but a quieter kind of evil, that the only reason he'd failed to stop this years ago was that he couldn't bear to burn away the last scrap of consciousness clinging to the thing. He didn't argue. He just asked me quietly whether I was afraid to die, and admitted that back then he had been, and that now he only wanted it to be over. Good. That made it simple, because the monster's whole power was that it could reach into you, read your worst fear, and build it, which is a belief engine, which is my engine, run backwards. So I spent 40 hours doing the only thing I have ever been truly good at. I wrote a character, and I became him. A boy called Akai, whose father was a miner, who was standing there in a gas-choked shaft the day a burst pipe turned that father into a screaming pillar of fire. Get out, Akai, run, a man like a monster soaked in flame and swallowed by it. 40 hours, until I didn't just remember Akai's fear, I owned it, until it was the deepest thing in me. And then I climbed onto the catwalk over that ocean of oil, and I called the monster up, and I let it read me, and it built my nightmare exactly. A towering thing wreathed in fire, my burning father reaching for me. Run, Akai, run. And I felt the real terror crash through me, total and childhood deep. My confidence gone, and the monster solidified its shape around that fear, becoming the flaming figure my soul was certain of. And then I let go of Akai the way you drop a roll when the scene ends, and I said, out loud, oh, by the way, my name isn't Akai, and my father was never a miner, because none of it was real. It was the greatest performance of my life, a lie so complete it fooled me, on purpose for 40 hours, so that a fear-reading monster would read a fear that pointed at fire and clothe its entire soul-drenched body in the image of a man made of flame. My fear plus its belief, double the documentation, a perfect recreation, and a thing that has made itself out of the image of fire, standing in a lake of the most flammable substance ever refined, is not a monster anymore. It's a bonfire that hasn't been lit. So I lit it. I threw the fear torch, and out of the burning image a human hand reached and caught it, Arthur Finch's hand, and his voice said, "Thank you, friend," and pulled the flame inside. The base went up like the inside of an engine, the whole mountain of stored fear, all that perfect fuel, caught at once and detonated, and Arthur Finch burned away with it, his long imprisonment finally ending. Glad, he told the empty snow, that he'd been brave at the end, even if no one was left to see it. Zhidong Mountain came down in fire and avalanche, and the machine and the oil and the monster and the good man who'd been trapped in it were all simply gone. I woke in the settlement space with 7 days and a fistful of ratings. Total control, because I'd owned that dungeon start to finish, unraveling the threads for cracking its truth, and a hidden reward for finishing the researcher's quest, which surprised even me. Good deeds pay apparently, when you do them for entirely selfish reasons. 6 items, and thanks to the double reward lie I'd carved into the fabric of every dungeon I'll ever play. 12. The fear torch came home wearing its true name, a supply box that makes food out of fear, a lens that shows you a person's worst nightmare, Arthur Finch's indestructible notebook, and a Truth Corporation clearance card that would, I suspected, matter a great deal the next time that company's shadow fell across a dungeon. Then the world went white in a different way, and the blood text confirmed it. Ascension Trial. Task 1 complete. Task 2 complete. Congratulations, you are now a Tier 1 player. On my 3rd game. The thing the rarest genius reaches at 7, and Tycoon had warned me sternly not to daydream about, done on my 3rd, and I made a private vow, again, to never ever tell a living soul. And then, it offered me my class item, the exclusive tool that turns a profession into a power, and gave me a choice of 2, and both of them were built for me like a key for a lock, a mask that lets me change my face and my build at will, or a counterfeit that copies any item I've ever seen, a god's gift to a con artist, and I was supposed to pick one. You already know I didn't. I burned my 1 charge of the tongue of deceit to make a lie true, that my administrator ability doubles what I earn, and the 2 items floated down into me together, a liar who can wear any face and forge any tool. If the first game gave me my ability and the second gave me the god's blessing, the third gave me the toolkit. The origin story was, more or less, complete. I climbed out of a freezer full of frozen dumplings, shaking, blue-lipped, wiped down the evidence, and cancelled the panicked text to Gao Rui before it could fire, a Tier 1 player. Which, I already understood, only meant I could finally, barely, protect myself, because if there's a Tier 1, there's a Tier 2 and a 3, and a whole ladder of worse things above me, and the girl in the sailor uniform who'd started all of this was somewhere near the top of it. I still wanted to know who she was, I still wanted her to answer for it. And I was still, underneath the 12 masks and the god's marks and the dead monster, a second-year drama student who lived in a warm little flat with a sister who'd raised him and left him angry notes about dinner. And I still wanted the stage back most of all. But I didn't go home that night. My sister thought I was pulling an all-nighter, and for once I had a rare, free night and a brand new toy. So in a camera blind spot in the dark, I pulled on the mask, and my height dropped, and my skin darkened, and my sharp, handsome face melted into a thin, forgettable, faintly sinister stranger. And I peeled off the bulky coat, and I walked across town and knocked on a certain restaurant door in the middle of the night. Tycoon opened the 2nd-floor window, wary, one hand behind his back, and looked down at a small dark man he had never seen before in his life, and I clasped my hands and smiled up at the friendly rich uncle who trusted me, who wanted to hire me, who thought he had my measure, and I introduced myself as a total stranger. Hello, Tycoon. You can call me Old Wang. I just cleared my 7th dungeon and I'd like to join your Jianggan Hall. He set me an assessment for Thursday. He had absolutely no idea he'd already met me, and standing there in a stolen face, being sized up by a man who'd have sworn on his gold rings he'd never seen me before, I finally understood exactly what I'd become in 3 short weeks. Not a hero, not a genius, just the one player in this whole death game who is never, ever the person you think you're talking to. And a man who can be anyone, I decided that night, should not settle for being one thing. So I didn't go home. I went to work on the most reckless plan I had ever talked myself into. The plan was this. Every dangerous organization in this city wanted a piece of me, and I had a face I could take off. So instead of joining one and being owned by it, I would join all of them, each under a different stolen face, and belong to none. A man made of masks does not pick a side, he audits all of them. I started with the Freedom Alliance because I already had a thread, the bike thief, whose real name Gao Rui had dug up, Sunjia. So I put on a face I'd never worn, a gentle young woman in a lab coat, called myself He-Ran, profession veterinarian, and I broke into her family's villa in the small hours. Her father kept a Rottweiler in the yard specifically so his daughter wouldn't get startled sneaking home. The Rottweiler rolled over and let me rub its belly, because I was a veterinarian now, and animals are the easiest audience in the world. Sunjia came flipping out her 2nd-floor window with a box cutter, thrilled that someone had finally found her house, and I told her I wanted to join the Freedom Alliance. She put the blade to my throat to test me. I pinched it off my neck without flinching, and she laughed and told me I'd already passed the only real entry test, which was having the nerve to show up in her living room at all. The Freedom Alliance, it turned out, only wanted people crazy enough to want the Freedom Alliance. Then the Jianggan Hall, as a scrawny, sinister little man named Old Wang. Tycoon, who had met me a week earlier as a handsome drama student and had no idea, set me an assessment and drove up in a shabby domestic van to deliver it in person with tremendous gravity. 3 sealed pouches, open them in order, pay a small price, bring back your spoils. Pouch 1 sent me to an address. Pouch 2 told me to approach the man in the black uniform and read the words on the back of a note. The address was a McDonald's. The man in black was a cashier, and the secret passphrase I solemnly recited was, 1 Big Mac meal, Coke, no ice, to go. I brought the great crime lord his burger, and he ate it in the front seat, squeezing ketchup directly into his mouth, moaning that he'd been craving it for ages, and declared that I'd passed and was now a made man of the Jungan Hall. The actual test, I realized later, wasn't the burger. It was that I could scan into the forum's private app at all, because the forum has some uncrackable way of allowing 1 account per living person, and Tycoon trusted it absolutely. He never dreamed a man could lie to the forum itself, but with the mask on, I could register new forum accounts all day. Even the god-tier surveillance of this world had a blind spot shaped exactly like my new face. While I was collecting organizations, 1 man was trying very hard to collect me. Kalen, the Henan detective, had gone home and decided he could not stand not knowing who June really was, and he was good. Genuinely good, patient the way real detectives are instead of clever the way fictional ones are. He worked backward from top students at good high schools, from handsome boys, from confession wall rescue posts, and he found a class photo 2 years old with exactly 1 face neatly erased from it, and an honor roll notice with 1 name blurred to just the surname, Wang. He was 1 attachment download away from my whole life. And then every screen in his internet cafe went blood red at once, and every other customer slumped asleep, and text crawled across the monitors. Player Kalen, you've crossed the line. He whispered a guess, are you a hacker? And the screen answered, that's right, and drew a little smiley face, and Kalen's legs stopped working. A petite girl in a hoodie ate his snacks off the desk, told him he had not passed, told him to stop investigating, and warned him that when she said she'd throw him out, she did not mean off the forum. Then she stepped into the computer screen and vanished, and when he swore, a hand reached back out of the monitor and slapped him and told him not to swear. I didn't know it yet, sitting in a taxi across the province, but the hacker watching over me, the one who'd just buried my secret and terrorized a man for getting close to it, was my own club president. Gao Rui had been a player this whole time. My best friend in the real world was already in the game, and she was quietly guarding the door. I went to Henan to recruit the detective properly because I'd found the 1 job worth crossing a province for. There was a marauder named Craftsman, Liang Jihao, 8,000 points on his head, wanted by order for killing 5 players, and I wanted him for reasons I'll get to. Kalen, it turned out, had already been investigating Craftsman himself and dug up the real story, which was sadder than the bounty made it sound. Craftsman had no family, divorced parents, a dead father, a dead guardian, a childhood spent essentially alone, and 1 single dream he'd built his whole adult life toward, a home of his own, in a building his own company was constructing. The building went bust. The dream died. So he killed the supplier and the foreman he blamed for it, and killed 3 more players to hide which 2 he'd actually wanted, and vanished into the 1 apartment he'd bought in that dead, half-built complex, because a man with nothing else will die in the ruins of the only thing he ever wanted. We found him there. Kalen waited downstairs, terrified, on strict instructions to call in his order contacts only after he heard a gunshot. And I went up to meet a Tier 1 killer with a claw hammer, wearing the face of a doctor, carrying a syringe I'd conjured with counterfeit and made real off Kalen's belief, the quack's tool that turns a small wound into a fatal one. Craftsman was crouched behind his door to ambush me. I strolled onto his balcony behind him and said hello, and named him, and the fight was over in about a minute. 2 soldier-strength blows numbed his hands off the hammer. Then I let him grab what he thought was a stick and lit the fear torch in his grip, and when the burn bloomed, I hit it with the syringe and turned a scorched hand into a scorched airway, and that was all it took. He'd been robbed of half his strength by Sun Jia weeks ago and never got it back. He never had a chance. I did feel it, a little. A man who only ever wanted a home. But feeling it and stopping are different things, and I've never confused them. And then I did the part I'd actually come for. I spent the next stretch banging a hammer around the apartment so Kalen would hear an epic battle, while I went through Craftsman's phone, learned his voice and his habits and the shape of the marauders, and put his face on with the mask. I burned his body on a pile of tinder with a recorded roar playing at full volume, shot myself in the shoulder, healed the worst of it, and jumped out the 3rd floor window as Craftsman, bloody and furious, right past a stunned Kalen. A marauder came screaming up in a drift taxi to save her wanted comrade, a woman called Hazel with a cigarette and a floral shirt, and I climbed in and let her drive Craftsman to safety, and she never doubted for 1 second that the man in her back seat was anyone but the killer she'd come to rescue. I ducked into an alley, took his face off, put mine back on, and just like that I was a marauder too, wearing a dead man's name. Then I walked back to the ruined building as June woke a groggy Kalen and gave him the performance that mattered most, the guilt-stricken friend, eyes red, blaming myself for letting Craftsman escape and nearly getting him killed, confessing I'd broken off the chase to treat the brain bleed he didn't know he'd had. And this idiot, this genuinely good idiot, looked at me tearing myself up over him and decided that the cold, using, threatening man he'd met in the snow had just been a shell and that underneath was a true friend worth more than any bounty. He told me so, moved nearly to tears. And an order squad leader named Wei Ning, a real police superintendent, arrived to hunt a craftsman who no longer existed, shook my hand, and marked me down as a loyal, principled doctor of good character. So in the span of one long day, I had killed a man and become him, joined the Marauders as his corpse, cemented a detective's undying loyalty, and earned the goodwill of Order's local commander. 4 organizations, 4 faces. And not one of them knew they'd all just met the same 20-year-old drama student who was, at that exact moment, mostly thinking about how badly he needed to sleep. Wei Ning liked me so much he offered to fast-track me into Order, skipping a round of background checks, and I accepted the business card with the humble gratitude of a man who absolutely intended to use it. That was the whole point of killing Craftsman as June, not just to steal a Marauder's face, but to earn, in the same afternoon, an open door into Order. 4 organizations now. And on my way out of town, I detoured to watch 2 of their top players actually fight, an Order captain with a heavy hammer against a Marauder boss with twin blades, both of them tier 3, moving so fast the air itself flinched away from where their weapons met. A Marauder leader shrugging off a hit that folded a steel tank like paper. That was my reality check. I was tier 1, brand new, and these men were a different species. If I wanted revenge on the girl in the sailor uniform, one afternoon of clever wasn't going to be enough. I climbed down off that roof feeling very small and very motivated. Then I put Craftsman's face back on and went to visit my new gang. The Marauders' local base was under a pool hall, down through a rigged fuse box and a trapdoor beneath a table into a converted bomb shelter that looked, honestly, like the break room of a tech startup. Ring and weights on one side, sofas and a bar and a TV playing anime on the other. Craftsman, it turned out, had been parachuted in as a deputy squad leader on the strength of his tier 1 rank, which meant the rank and file resented him, which was perfect because a man everyone dislikes is a man nobody knows well. I stood at their bar while they took cheap shots at Craftsman for losing his hammer and running from Order, and instead of the duel Craftsman would have snarled for, I put on cold restraint and posted a job. 100,000 to help me hunt the people who'd humiliated me. 500,000 for a tier 1 who'd come along. The targets I named were the Divine Thief of the Freedom Alliance and a Jiangcheng doctor called Sally Sue who'd burned my house down. In other words, I hired the Marauders to hunt Sunja and myself. I do enjoy my work. Then I made the rounds. As he ran the veterinarian, I went back to Sunja's villa, past the trader dog, and borrowed the one thing I actually needed from her, Craftsman's stolen bone crusher, the hammer that finds a living body's weak point, and I told her to make very sure she had witnesses putting her far away at 2 o'clock. She handed it over, half suspecting I was a Marauder plant, entirely unable to resist finding out what I was up to. And as Old Wang, I ran to Tycoon and breathlessly reported that the Marauders and the Divine Thief were meeting in secret and talked my grateful boss into lending me a sightseeing cruise boat crewed by 2 of his expendable men. Everyone had now been positioned. Sunja thought I was clearing her enemies. Tycoon thought I was scoring a coup for the Jungin Hall. The Marauders thought their deputy leader was leading them to revenge, and every single one of those beliefs was about to pay out at once. I led 5 Marauders onto that boat as their craftsmen, told the 2 smartest to stay ashore, kept the tier 1 and 3-foot soldiers aboard, and cast off into the middle of the river where Order couldn't reach and no one could run. The cabin was comfortable, sodas in the cooler, a deck of cards, the 4 of them relaxing into what they thought was a war council. I took the tier 1 up to the deck for air. Blue Orchid, a musician with a 7,000-point bounty, leaning on the rail watching the city lights on the water, and I got him talking, got him soft, told him Craftsman's sad true story about the swindled savings and the dead dream of a home, and he was genuinely moved and told me he believed in me. And then I showed him the bone crusher he thought was still lost, and while he was still leaning in to admire it, I brought it around in a flat, hard arc, and he went down and did not get up. One of the deadliest men on that river, and it took a hammer he never saw and a story he wanted to believe. I photographed him and uploaded it to the Hunter Association as he ran, and 3 merged bounties paid out just over $1 million into an account that didn't exist that morning. Then I took his face. I smeared a little blood on it, put on his clothes, rolled him into the river, and staggered back into the cabin as Blue Orchid, panting, wild-eyed, that craftsman had been ambushed and gone into the water, that it was a thief, too fast to see. Divine Thief, they whispered, and the fear took the room. And I let them decide on their own that 2 of them had to go up to the bridge to make the captain dock because you can't kill players in front of ordinary people. That left me alone in the cabin with one, a doctor called Soft Snow, who came forward to heal Blue Orchid's wounds and found a cute pink box cutter in his hand instead. A class item quick knife, and 1 clean line across the throat to bait out her healing, and a second, from the side, to finish it. Because a fraudster who studied the Thief's Rank Advancement Guide knows exactly how a quick knife kills. Her phone, clutched in her hand, held a text from Craftsman I'd sent minutes before. Blue Orchid is the divine thief in disguise. So when the 2 thugs ran back down to her cry for help and found her and saw that message and looked up at the man they thought was Blue Orchid smiling with a knife, their belief snapped back into place just in time to make my next lie true, and it was over in the doorway before either of them finished shouting a warning. 4 marauders and a tier 1, gone in an evening, and I was the only one still standing, having been at various points that night. Craftsman, He Ran, and Blue Orchid, sometimes minutes apart. I gathered the bodies, uploaded the rest to the Hunter Association as Old Wang, and watched another 200,000 land. I'd walked onto that boat with 3 faces and walked off a millionaire. Then, when the mask cooled, I became Old Wang one last time and strolled up to Tycoon's 2 crewmen, who nodded at their Jongan Hall colleague, and I called my boss to report a great victory. The Marauder squad wiped out. Craftsman escaped into the river, sadly, a flawless operation for the glory of the Jongan Hall. Tycoon was thrilled with his rising star. Sunjia was thrilled her enemies had evaporated and would trust He Ran even more. Order would find a burned house and an empty bounty, and nobody, on any of the 4 sides of that night, had the faintest idea that all of it, every face, every corpse, every bounty, every grateful boss, was one broke drama student who 3 weeks ago had never told a serious lie in his life. The cleanup took the rest of the night and 3 more faces. As he ran, I let the coward Hazel live and flee because a terrified survivor who runs and tells the story is worth more to me than another corpse. As Craftsman, dripping river water, I met Sunjia on a mudflat, returned her stolen hammer, played the broken man, and let her walk away thinking she'd diffused a marauder feud with a shrug. And by dawn, I'd collected $1 million and change from the Hunter Association as he ran, another 120,000 in gold bars as Old Wang, and gone home to leave 20,000 cash on the table for my sleeping sister under the cover story that the ad business was booming. But the money was never really the point, and I want to be honest about that, because a man could hate me a lot less if it were just greed. I could have quietly lured those marauders somewhere and killed them for the bounty without ever showing my face to Tycoon or Sunjia. Instead, I made very sure that 4 separate organizations each walked away with a vivid memory of a different one of my faces, all of them tangled together in the same night's story. Because I'd figured out the deepest rule of being a fraudster. Belief doesn't only die when a lie is exposed. It also dies from being forgotten. That's why my manifestations expire. But the fake weapons I sold at the gathering stayed real, because every buyer who used one believed in it again. So if enough people remember a lie often enough, if a lie becomes a story that gets retold, it stops expiring. It becomes true. So I wasn't just building disguises, I was building legends. Old Wang, He Ran, Sally Sue, and now Craftsman, each one deliberately made famous, each one deliberately linked to the others in rumor, so that soon players who had never met me would swear these people existed, and the powers of a dozen professions would be mine to wear on demand, permanently, with no one left alive who could remember they were ever a lie. Within a week, Sally Sue was a topic on the forum, the mystery doctor who'd gutted a marauder squad, and Kalen was in the comments loudly calling me his best friend and getting fined by an administrator for swearing at people who doubted him. Every word of it fed the legend. And with a real friend who happened to be the best detective I knew, I finally started pulling the thread I actually cared about, the Psychological Society. An academy of lunatics, structured like a university, a 5-seat council, whole departments dedicated to screening the population for potential and then killing or recruiting the promising, which is exactly what they'd done to me. The single worst thing you can meet in a dungeon, because they will spend a whole game engineering your death just to see if you're worth saving. And buried under all the public files, the one piece I wanted, my murderer, codename Serotonin, profession, assassin, an S-class agent of their execution division, one of only 3, so dangerous that Kalen begged me to leave her alone. I looked at the blurry hooded photo, that beautiful cold sharp face I'd last seen over the barrel of a Beretta, and I finally had her name, Serotonin. I hope you're strong, I told the photo. Otherwise, the show I'm writing for you is going to be a real disappointment. The next game announced its entry price a day later, and it was the worst yet. Jump from at least 100 meters before midnight. So I booked a suite in a 400-meter tower, took the elevator to the rooftop garden, climbed over the railing onto the maintenance mesh in the wind, and looked down at the whole glittering city with my heart going despite everything, because you can die a dozen times and still not love standing on the outside of a railing 400 meters up. At 11:05, I stepped off. And falling, wind screaming, ground rushing up, adrenaline turning the whole world electric, I ran my hands over my face and put on a mask I had been building toward for 3 weeks without admitting it. The blood text bloomed. Feast above the heavens. Survive until the banquet ends. 7 players. And the pavement that should have ended me simply vanished. I was still falling, but higher now, over a black churning ocean, 6 other figures dropping alongside me, and then a chair came up out of nowhere and caught me, soft leather absorbing a fall that should have been the end, leaving me sitting hundreds of meters in the air in a chair hung from the sky by 4 ropes. A round white table descended on its own ropes. And in a pool at its center rose a giant red octopus in a chef's hat, booming like a holiday radio host, welcoming the honored guests to the feast of its lord, the god of feasts and fine wine and revelry. It introduced itself as host and head chef and lobby manager and security captain, a creature called Z. Then it flung a full set of cutlery so it stuck in the table a centimeter from each of our hands, just so we understood that the cooked-looking octopus was not, in fact, harmless. The rules were 3. No attacking each other unless the Lord allows it. Eat every dish, waste nothing, or be punished. And mind your table manners at every course, or the host would do something to make everyone unhappy. A survival dungeon dressed as a dinner party. Then Z bounced off to prepare the food and told us to introduce ourselves. And one by one they did, and my stomach went cold, because this was not a rookie table. Wan Lei, the gambler, Order's own administrator of Haicheng, so strong he introduced himself by his real name. Old Turnip, a humble farmer who happened to be a founder of the Player Mutual Aid Society. Fang Jin, a magician of the Freedom Alliance, Sunja's own organization. A Mei, deputy chief of the Marauders' Beijing headquarters, who casually let slip she had a unique profession, the first one besides mine I'd ever seen. Enfield Rifle, a lone hunter and one of the deadliest bounty collectors alive. And Holly, a shy painter of the Night Watchers nobody else quite knew. 6 of the most dangerous players in the country at one floating table, and then it was my turn, and every one of them was already staring at my face with dread because the reckless legend I'd been building for 3 weeks had, by some cruel miracle of fate, given me exactly the wrong face to be wearing in exactly the right room. So I brushed a strand of hair back, and I smiled with a voice like ice against glass, and I told the 6 most powerful people in the game the most dangerous lie I had ever told. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Serotonin. Serotonin. Of the Psychological Society. The table nearly came apart on the spot. Enfield Rifle's bow was strung before I finished the word. A Mei was up on her chair with a flintlock in each hand. Turnip had a flower pot up like a shield, and Fang Jin had crawled bodily into his own hat. And then A Mei grinned at me, at Sister Nail, and offered an alliance because the forum's blacklist had accidentally made the 3 heretic organizations natural friends, and a marauder, a Freedom Alliance magician, and a Psychological Society assassin will always gang up on the Order man first, which meant that by wearing the face of my own killer, I'd inherited her allies. I took the deal. Then Wan Lei, the Order gambler, calmly held up a little billboard that displayed a fact he'd just verified with his power. The odds of being punished if we fought right now, 100%, and everyone put their weapons away, and Enfield Rifle cheerfully recited our Hunter Association bounties like a man reading stock prices. 9 million on him, 9 and change on A Mei, 13 on Serotonin. I corrected him, because I'd actually added it up on the app, 15.25 million on my head, and I said it with a bored little smile, because that is exactly how a woman worth 15 million says it. Then Z came bouncing back with the drinks, and the first real test. 6 glasses for 7 players, flung into the air, and whoever came up empty lost a rope from their chair. The elites moved so fast I barely tracked it. Enfield Rifle's hunting dog leapt and snatched one. Wan Lei flicked a coin that curved a glass into his hand. Fang Jin's hat swallowed one whole. A Mei netted one. Turnip reeled one in on a novelty sticky hand, and in about 2 seconds there was 1 glass left and 2 of us without, so I didn't lunge. I leaned on my chin and drawled that it was awfully early in the evening to be showing everyone your whole hand over a drink, and I nudged the floating table with a fingertip so the last glass rolled off the edge, and I caught it on 1 finger and spun it up between 2, because the shy painter across from me, Holly, hadn't reached for it at all. She just quietly drew a glass on her sketch paper and shook it off the page into her hand, identical to ours, and politely asked the octopus if she could use her own. And I filed that away with a cold little chill, because Holly had also, earlier, been the one person at the table who knew instantly that my Beretta was a fake. which meant Holly knew exactly what the real serotonin carried, which meant Holly had survived meeting the real serotonin, which made the shy girl in the dirty t-shirt the single most dangerous unknown at a table of monsters. The wine itself was the trap. Sorrow, the octopus called it. A vintage bottled at the height of something called the Oblivion Mist, and it tasted like the best thing I'd ever drunk right up until it reached past my tongue and into my soul, and made me relive the worst grief of my life. Fire, an explosion, a building coming down, people on their knees screaming up at the sky through the smoke. And here's the thing I'd never told anyone. The thing that made my Winter Mountain lie about a boy whose father burned only half a lie. A long time ago, I really did lose someone to a fire. So I sat there and watched my own worst memory play out in front of me in full. And I did not cry or curse or break anything. Because I'm an actor, and managing emotion is the first thing they teach you, and I had already visited that grief 100 times in rehearsal until I could stand inside it and feel every degree of it and still calmly take notes. May slammed the table and swore. Turnip wept openly. Every red-rimmed eye at that table belonged to someone drowning in their own worst day, and I sat in the middle of it perfectly composed and realized something I did not enjoy realizing. To pass as a legendary psychopath, I hadn't needed to act crazier than her. I'd needed to feel less. Maybe, in that one specific way, I was more broken than the real serotonin. I put a careful performed sadness on my face because a total blank would have been stranger than tears, and Z mashed 2 buttons and cut a rope each from May and Turnip for their outburst, and the meal went on. The appetizer taught me how these people fight, and it was genuinely frightening. Choose foie gras or snails, said the octopus, and everyone treated it as choosing which test they'd face, and I was the only one who noticed that the dish you didn't choose came at you alive. So while 3 of them fought a wasteland goose taller than a man, and 3 fought an armored, poison-spitting snail, I sat behind my glass having quietly ordered a double of the already cooked kind and skipped the fight entirely, and I watched the masters work. Turnip, the humble farmer, tore open a paper talisman and dropped a 4-arm-thick bolt of lightning that left the goose a charred smear, then winced because he'd just burned something rare and precious to do it. Wanlei rolled a 20-sided die, and reality kept failing the goose, trips and cramps and dizzy spells, until he threw down 2 poker chips painted with eyes, dealt the bird a losing hand, and its eyes simply went out. Holly bit her finger and sketched the goose in her own blood and crushed the drawing, and the real goose folded in on itself as if a fist had closed around it. May dissolved a snail's armor in a scroll of green acid. Fang Jin made his vanish under a red cloth. Enfield Rifle cracked a shell with a fanged tool. 7 impossible people solving the same problem 8 impossible ways, and me, doing nothing, being underestimated, which is the only place I've ever been comfortable. Then we had to eat it, and that was the real test. The foie gras was rich enough to drown in. Luckily, my family runs a restaurant, and I've been out eating grown men since I was a kid, so I put away a double portion faster than anyone. And then, for research, I ate a snail too, and learned what the snail actually was. The pain didn't hit my stomach, it hit my fingers and toes, all 20 at once. A bright, screaming pain the poison delivered straight to the nerves, the octopus's cheerful version of what it would do to a normal person before it killed them. Wanlei choked down pills and shook. Holly curled into a ball, gray-faced and sweating. And I, who in real life yelp when I burn my hand on a pan and once faked perfect health through 102 fever to dodge a needle, sat there with every nerve in my hands and feet on fire and said lightly in serotonin's voice, "Oh, what an interesting sensation. This is the weak version, you know. An ordinary person would die screaming from the full dose." And Wanlei stared at me and decided I was a monster, an S-class monster, exactly as advertised. He was wrong about which monster. But he wasn't wrong that something at that table felt a lot less than it should, and I was starting to suspect it wasn't the psychopath. The soup was a full heal, which every gamer knows means one of 2 things. You just beat the boss, or you're about to meet it. And the octopus confirmed it, announcing the side dish, a gift from the end of the world to the pioneers, and the main course, the blood of the victor is always sweet, and then hauled the whole table up on a winch, up past the clouds into a churning sky sea, where things the size of buses hunted things the size of cars. We had 30 minutes to catch our own ingredients from that. And I looked at the monsters swimming through the storm and knew, with total clarity, that I could not fight a single one of them. So I did what serotonin would do. I robbed the other guests. But first, the Sky Sea gave me a moment alone with Holly, and I took it, because information about my killer was the entire reason I'd worn this face, and I wasn't going to waste the one private conversation I might get just because it was dangerous. It was very dangerous. Holly opened by asking about the fake Beretta, and I spun it as a prank, sparing a promising player, and she cut straight through it. She knew the real serotonin's kit down to the signature, a set she called Guns and Roses. She'd nearly died to it. She was, it turned out, a tier 3 painter, a profession whose whole gift is knowing things, and she'd done her homework. And then she said the sentence that stopped my heart. She said my being here was connected to Zhongcheng, and when I fished carefully, she laid it all out. Zhongcheng Media University. A player the Psychological Society's flawless potential meter had rated S+, only the second S+ ever measured, when most of the council thought he was a mere A, a talent so rare the gods themselves might be watching him. She was describing me. She'd identified the drama student under the assassin's mask, and she wasn't even trying to. She'd simply investigated the wrong thread and arrived at the right man. I did not confirm it. I deflected with a smile and a mystery, and kept the little raven mark of the god of change hidden under my sleeve, the mark that answered the exact question she was chewing on, which god was watching. And Holly let it go, muttered what a madman, and I grabbed the rope and stepped off the table into a thunderstorm, 4 kilometers up with no harness and no knots, purely because it was the most serotonin thing I could possibly do, and left her staring. But I carried that word off the table with me. S+, the second ever. I'd spent 3 weeks feeling like a small clever fish in a very large pond. It turned out the whole pond had been built to grow me. The robbery at least was pure comedy. I couldn't out-hunt these people, but I could out-crazy them, and a name worth 15 million on the bounty boards does a lot of the work. I found Enfield Rifle, the profit-minded bounty hunter, standing over a fresh kill, and offered him a Western showdown for it, and reminded him that fighting meant punishment for both of us, and that I was, being an S-class lunatic, perfectly happy to eat the punishment. He was not. A man who prices everything, including his own life, does not gamble it over one fish, and he handed it over. I found Fang Jin, the cautious Freedom Alliance magician, and demanded half his catch. He negotiated, shrewd as ever, and asked me to swear I wouldn't harm him. Swear to whom? I asked. To the gods, he said, half joking. So I put my hand on my chest and swore to the gods I would not harm him this dungeon, and I watched real relief cross his face, and I filed that away too, because in this world, an oath to the gods is apparently a load-bearing thing, and the Psychological Society, I was starting to understand, wasn't a society at all, it was a church. And I found old Turnip, the gentle farmer who'd somehow collected all 4 safe ingredients, and told him I'd come to rob him, and he beamed and handed me half his basket like I was an honored guest. And my dry little conscience actually twinged, which almost never happens. Then Z bought my surplus for 99 sheets of delicious paper, a divine banquet currency you trade for random food, and I went back to my chair the richest guest at the table, having personally hunted exactly nothing. Then came the main course, and it was a masterpiece of a trap. The table rose above the storm into clear, empty sky, and a giant screen dropped down showing an arena the old farmer quietly recognized as a place of certain death, borrowed from a god of judgment. And into that arena came 3 chained monsters, a great white werewolf of a royal bloodline, jailed for forbidden sins, for devouring its own kind and stitching stolen souls into power, a 4-armed Rakshasa demon of the Blood Kingdom, a head taller than the wolf, and a tall, thin, faceless black thing, an alchemical creation called a shadow-type pseudo-human, that its own maker had locked away for being too dangerous to control. The rule was simple. Bet on which one wins. Each of us picked, in reverse order of who held the least delicious paper. Wan Lei the gambler burned his power and grimly chose the demon. Turnip and Enfield Rifle followed him. Fang Jin and Aimei took the werewolf, and Holly, then I, chose the black shadow thing because Holly had met one before, in a dungeon she'd survived called the Ghost City, where it had a worse name, Soul-Eating Shadow, and she'd said, with the flat certainty of real trauma, that nothing kills it, and the duel turned out not to be a fight at all. It was an eating contest, food raining down into 3 walled pens. First to clear their pile wins, and the spectators, us, could throw in items to help. The demon and the wolf tore into their mountains of food while the shadow thing just calmly stacked its pile higher and did nothing, and everyone who'd bet against it relaxed, right up until the black figure's little seam of a mouth peeled open into a funnel wider than its own head, dropped over the pile and swallowed a third of it in a single bite. That's when the table understood it was losing and started reaching for their support items to buff the demon and the wolf, and that's when I understood they'd all missed the actual game, because they were all trying to help their own monster eat faster, and the octopus had never once said the food had to fall from the sky. The support items could be anything, and the win condition was to empty your pile. So the correct move wasn't to feed your fighter, it was to bury the other 2. I demonstrated it by trading 20 sheets of delicious paper for a roasted boar leg the size of my own body and dropping it cheerfully into the demon's pen and announced the lesson to the table. Don't lift yourself up, weigh the others down. A very simple philosophy, and it works in more than banquets. That cracked the whole game open, and the elites, being elites, understood it in about a second and immediately started a food war. Wan Lei flicked pizza across the table on a coin curve. Fang Jin folded a bun bigger than the slingshot he fired it from, Enfield rifles animals ran food into pens. A May blasted Holly's defensive wall apart with a flintlock that fired like a cannon and got scolded by the octopus for it. And behind that wall, Holly and I ran a much quieter game. Because I'd learned by now that against people this smart, you don't win by outcalculating them. You win by deciding what they calculate about. So I did 3 things at once, and only one of them was real. First, I burned all 58 of my delicious paper in one grand reckless gesture for a single tiny cupcake and held it up as a threat. If anyone touches my pen, I dump this into theirs and ruin the arithmetic for everyone, a nuclear deterrent from a woman crazy enough to nuke herself. Then I ate the cupcake, in front of them, and revealed that the 58 sheets I'd burned had been an illusion, that I still had all of them, and let Fang Jin the magician applaud the sleight of hand, let all of them refocus on my paper and my food and the wall, exactly where I wanted their eyes, because none of that was the plan. The plan was the thing they'd stopped watching. Weeks earlier, a god had handed me a lens that shows you a person's deepest fear, and a notebook that preserves anything written in it forever, and a supply box that makes food out of terror. I'd been carrying my whole strange toolkit into this banquet without knowing why. Now I knew. Behind Holly's wall, I turned the fear lens on the white werewolf across the arena and saw the worst thing in its long, murderous life, a silver cross and a monster hunter who had wiped out its entire bloodline when it was small. So I had Holly, the Tier 3 painter, draw that silver cross, and I locked the drawing into the indestructible notebook so it couldn't fail, and while the whole table watched my cupcake and my paper, we slipped the notebook into the werewolf's pen. The cross rose up gleaming, and the white wolf who'd been winning simply folded, collapsing into its food, drowning in a terror older than any of us. And that terror, that raw broadcast of fear, I fed straight into the supply box that runs on exactly that, and it erupted, a fountain of food burying the demon in the next pen under a mountain it could never finish. 2 of the 3 fighters buried under fear and its byproduct, and the slow black shadow thing quietly ate its way to an empty pen and won. Holly and I won. I told her I would let her win if she believed me without reservation, and she had, and I had, and she looked at me like I was something she couldn't file, which, fair. The 5 losers each had 2 ropes cut, and each survived it with some impossible trinket. A magic rabbit chaining a man to his chair, a hunter cabling his seat back together, an old farmer growing a net of vines, a marauder propping her chair on eyeball-sized drones. 7 of the most dangerous people alive, and I just sat at the head of their table, worn the face of the assassin who murdered me into this world, and beaten every last one of them without landing a single blow, using nothing but a lens, a notebook, a lunchbox, a borrowed painter, and a lie about a cupcake. And sitting there, victorious, with the octopus off to fetch a main course ominously named The Blood of the Victor is Always Sweet, I finally let myself add it all up. 3 weeks ago, I was a second-year drama student who had never told a serious lie, shot dead on a stage by a girl I'd never met. Since then, I'd conned a room of werewolves, played God, out-argued an actual god, become a Tier 1 player 4 ranks ahead of the rarest genius, walked into 4 organizations wearing 4 faces, and now out-schemed the 7 strongest players in the country while pretending to be my own killer. Holly had let it slip that the Psychological Society's flawless meter rated me S+, the second ever measured, a talent the gods themselves stooped to watch. And underneath all of it, I was still a kid who left cash on the table for the sister who raised him, who wanted the stage back more than any of this, who yelped when he burned his hand on a pan, and then the octopus came back to cook the main course, and reminded me why none of the winning ever lasts. The main course was the winner. Of course it was. The octopus pulled the shadow thing down out of the sky it had just floated up into, pinned it with 7 tentacles, and with the 8th, calmly put a knife into it, and it went still. And a little black crystal came out on the blade, and Z wrung the rest into a pan like a dish rag and set it cooking. The thing that nothing could kill, the thing Holly had nightmares about, dispatched in 4 seconds by the smiling cook so that even the deadliest people at that table quietly abandoned any plan of fighting the octopus later. And then the smell came off the pan, and it was the best thing any of us had ever smelled, because a soul-eating shadow is apparently packed with life, and every fighter at that table had an eating gift, and the cook could recreate everything they'd ever tasted in one dish. He plated 2 squares of it in red sauce and handed 1 each to Holly and me, the winners, and called it The Blood of the Victor is Always Sweet. And it was. Bite after bite of a dozen perfect flavors at once, delivered straight to the soul. And the last bite Z had promised was a surprise. The surprise was a low table with a wobbly plastic chair and a whole steamed grass carp with hot oil hissing over the scallions, and a little girl in an apron holding a pot, grinning with that too grown-up pride. This fish was 3 pounds and it cost me under 10 yuan, she said. The boss even threw in a bag of clams. Aren't I amazing? It wasn't a special day. It was an ordinary afternoon when I was 10, before my sister dropped out, when we lived on savings and welfare, and she still found a way to put a whole fish on the table and make it feel like a holiday. Some ordinary days get carved into you for no reason at all and become the actual shape of the word happy. I picked up the chopsticks and I tasted my sister's steamed fish, which I hadn't had in years because she's too busy running the shop alone now, and I can't stand to watch her go to that much trouble for me. And then, after about 3 seconds, I put it down and came back to the table. The octopus was almost offended. 3 seconds, sir, it said. You really aren't a man who lingers in the past. Beside me, Holly was crying and stayed gone 6 or 7 whole minutes and came back embarrassed and wiped her eyes and admitted she'd seen her dead grandmother, who used to make her green beans and eggplant. And she asked how long I'd taken, and when I told her 3 seconds, she stared at me like I'd said something monstrous and asked, almost hurt, don't you have anything you miss? And I told her the truth, which was crueler than any lie I'd told all night. Of course not, because the person I saw isn't dead. My sister is alive and busy and 1 phone call away, and I can have that fish anytime I'm willing to let her make it, so I have nothing to mourn. Holly bit her lip and said she'd kill me someday, and I told her I sincerely hoped she would, because she thinks she's threatening serotonin, and if the shy girl who can bend reality with a pencil ever puts my murderer in the ground, I will laugh in my sleep for a year. But I want to sit in that 3 seconds for a moment, because it's the truest thing in this whole story. Holly wept because her happiest memory is behind a door that will never open again. Mine wasn't, and that's the entire reason I came back. Not for the stage, though I want the stage. Not for revenge, though I'll have it. When that girl in the sailor uniform put a bullet in me on my own stage, the last thing I felt wasn't fear. It was fury that I wasn't done, that there were performances I hadn't given and a sister I hadn't paid back. So when a god offered a liar a second chance, I took it, and I have lied and schemed and killed and worn a dozen dead people's faces to keep it. And somewhere along the way, I got so good at feeling nothing that I can out-calm an actual psychopath and taste my own childhood and set it down in 3 seconds. That should probably frighten me more than it does. But I know exactly what all the faces are for. There's a woman at home right now who dropped out of school to raise me, who leaves me angry notes about skipping dinner, who thinks I've been out filming ad videos, and who is the one real thing under all the masks. Everything I've become, I became to keep the space around her quiet and safe and hers. And then the banquet moved on to dessert, and dessert was where the whole table finally turned on each other, because the dessert was the cruelest game yet. Each of us got a sweet shaped from our own profession, with a card hidden inside, and to find the card you had to use your profession's own gift, and worse, walk back into your ugliest memory from a dungeon, and every card cut or repaired the ropes that were the only thing between us and a very long fall. The polite alliance died right there, because a card in someone else's hand was a knife pointed at your chair. Holly went first, a blank white chocolate canvas, and painted golden scissors on it. The first item she'd ever seen in a dungeon, the one that killed everyone who'd been in that game with her, and out came a scissors card, cut 2 chairs of your choosing. May got an edible alarm clock and had to set it to the most important minute of her life, and I watched her face do something complicated and furious and sad before she spun it to a time only she could read, and got a knot card, mend 5 broken ropes, which she used at once, so half the table climbed back towards safety. Wanlei crushed a loaded die and answered the question, when did you lose the most, and drew red scissors, cut 2 ropes at random. Old Turnip grew his harvest and remembered a dungeon where he led 8 people in and walked out alone, and got an iron rope card that made 2 ropes uncuttable, and spent it kindly. And Fangjin lit the number 5 on a birthday cake, some birthday he clearly never wanted to remember, and pulled black scissors, cut 5 ropes at random, and used them, and the whole table lurched and swore as ropes snapped everywhere. That was the trap the octopus had built, and it was elegant. It handed out cutting cards and mending cards in roughly equal numbers, so the smart players, Wanlei especially, kept calculating the total rope count like an accountant, trying to keep everyone alive. But the cuts always outnumbered the mends, and every mend was random, and Wanlei, under the order badge and the good guy reputation, was doing a much colder sum in his head. He'd keep the total high if he could, but if it came down to it, he was perfectly willing to spend his last card dropping the 3 heretic organization cores out of the sky, the Marauder, the Freedom Alliance Magician, and the crazy assassin from the Psychological Society, which was me. 4 ropes or not, I was on Wanlei's quiet list, and Wanlei does not miss his sums. So I stopped letting the table do arithmetic and started giving it a story to look at instead. Every time a card came up, I nudged the room toward chaos, toward randomness, toward using the cards now instead of hoarding them, and I talked Holly into spending her own scissors on herself without choosing a target, and May into believing I'd never cut her, and Wanlei into watching my 4 ropes with the growing suspicion that I was up to something he couldn't price. He was right. He just couldn't see it yet. Because weeks ago, a god had let me test drive a cog of prophecy, the item that makes one stated fact undeniable, and I'd spent one of its charges earlier at this very table on a lie about how many sheets of delicious paper I'd burned, and the cupcake I'd bought with that fake math hadn't been a cupcake at all. It had carried a buff called Lucky Sweet, a massive dose of pure luck for my next stretch of the meal, which I'd swallowed on purpose the moment I understood this whole round would be decided by random cards. So the random cards came, and cut, and cut, and cut, and every single one of them missed me. Rope after rope snapped around the table until 6 of the most dangerous people alive were each swaying on one thin cord over a 4-kilometer drop, and my chair still hung serene and level on all 4 of its ropes, and I sat there and told them, brightly, that I guessed I was just very lucky. Then the octopus offered me my dessert, and I turned it down, because a dessert shaped from my profession would have shown the whole table a tool no assassin carries, and I'd sooner eat a punishment than get exposed one course from the finale. So I took a single rope cut, which does nothing to a man with 4, and I explained my refusal in the most serotonin way imaginable. I told them the final card of that round cut everyone's rope, that I'd known the contents of every card all along, that this was a banquet the gods themselves were watching, and I refused to let a single one of these magnificent people die one course early, because that would be embarrassing. It was pure invention. The octopus didn't correct me, because I'd already worked out that the octopus didn't actually know what the cards would be either. And so, guided by a prophecy I'd made up on the spot, the whole table spent its last cards, and every one of them entered the final round of the feast. Above the heavens, swaying on a single thread, exactly as I wanted, the drama pushed to the edge of the abyss where it belonged. I stood up and gave them a line to remember me by, cryptic and cracked, an invitation to find me back in the real world, above the rainbow at dusk, on a night when 30 pieces of silver clink. A May asked if I could please talk like a human being. I sat back down and smiled, and did not. Then the ropes hauled us up through the last invisible membrane, and we met the host. He was a giant in a white robe with a head shaped like a wine jug, features drawn on in a few careless lines, and every rope holding every one of us ran up to a different one of his fingers. The god of feasts, fine wine, and revelry, running the finale of his own game in person, cheerful as a man who throws the best parties in existence. A glass appeared in each of our hands without any of us feeling it arrive, which frightened me more than any display of power could have, because he'd moved my own body, and I never noticed. And he offered us the last drink of the night, a thing called Best Daydream, half finished on purpose, which we each had to complete ourselves, not with our hands, with our deepest desire. Mine came on like the best liquor I'd never tasted, and then it showed me the future I wanted, and I want to be honest about what it was, because it's the truest thing anyone will ever learn about me. A red carpet, 1,000 lights, all on me. The highest award an actor can win, in front of the whole world. My own performance on the screen behind me, making every critic and every legend in that room forget their own names. The throne of my entire art, waiting, and I was furious. Because the daydream had skipped the only part I actually wanted. It cut straight to the trophy and left out the acting. It gave me the crown and not the performance, the honor and not the work. And that is exactly backwards, because I have never once in my life wanted to be adored. I want to act. So I finished the drink the way it should have been finished. I walked up onto that stage, and I took the golden trophy from the presenter, and I slammed the microphone until the whole hall went silent, and I told every critic and academy and tastemaker in that room, calmly, that they had never acted a day in their lives, that they crowned things that smelled correct and mistook fashion for truth, and that their pathetic little honor meant nothing to me. And I threw the trophy down, and it shattered, and I told them they had no right to crown me. The daydream froze. And the god of feasts appeared beside me, shrunk down to my height, delighted out of his painted mind. Arrogance, he breathed. You added arrogance to honor. Better than being adored is grinding the fame that others starve for under your heel. I never even imagined it. Full marks. Full marks. And he told me I was precious, that this obsession, this sincerity, this bright unconscious pride was exactly what he wanted, that I'd finished first and finished furthest, that of the 7 guests at his table, 6 had been handpicked by him, and the 7th seat he'd left to fate, and fate had brought him the perfect one. He couldn't see my face, even here, even in my own dream, because something as powerful as himself was hiding me, and he could only tell from my performance that my profession had to do with acting. He said he wanted me for his own, his kin, his agent. And he told me to think it over while he finished the paperwork, and rewarded my little tantrum with 5 new ropes, and I raised my glass of hard liquor gone smooth over ice to a god who wanted to hire me, and drank. I don't want to be worshipped. I don't want a crown. When a god offered me the highest honor a performer can be given, the truest part of me took it in both hands and smashed it on the floor because the only thing I have ever wanted is to be on the stage while the scene is still going. That's who I am, under all the faces. I finally got to watch it happen, and I have to tell you, even I was a little surprised how much I meant it. The god saved me for last, cleared the table of the others one by one, each of them promising to come find serotonin in Jiangcheng, and then sat down across from me, shrunk to human size, cutting into a steak, and let me ask two questions. My first was the one that mattered. What would the octopus have served me for dessert? And the answer nearly stopped my heart. A thing called narrative trick, shaped like a quill pen, which is not an assassin's tool, which is a liar's tool, which would have peeled my whole disguise open in front of the 7 deadliest people in the country. I had refused it on instinct, to protect a secret I didn't even know it threatened, and instinct had saved my life again. My second question was why he'd called me the uninvited guest. Because, he said, the other 6 had each received a formal invitation to this banquet, a reward for their potential, and the 7th seat he'd left open for fate. And fate had walked me in wearing my murderer's face. He couldn't see through the mask, not even here, not even a god, because something his own equal had marked me with was hiding me, and all he could read off me was that my profession touched performance. He asked again if I'd be his agent. I thanked him and smiled and gave him the kind of answer that isn't one, and then the settlement took me before he could press. I have enough gods interested in my career already. I woke on the edge of the rooftop, mid-fall arrested, one breath from the pavement, and climbed back over the railing on legs that had, technically, just spent a week at a dinner party in the sky, so the game rewinds you to the exact moment you left. Good to know. I took off the mask, walked back down through the fire door, and checked what a generous god pays out, and it was a fortune. A reusable, delicious paper that summons food anywhere. A feast pendant that turns eating into buffs. A blissful immortal pot that lets me bottle a buff and drink it later. For the first time, I had real power that had nothing to do with lying, a way to actually fight, stacked on top of craftsman's hammers, and the counterfeit syringe, and the fear torch, and the guaranteed gun. If I met a tier 1 like craftsman again, I wouldn't need a trick or a sneak attack. I'd just win. And then, there was the last gift, the one marked as divine favor. And when I summoned it, there was a wet little sound, and a palm-sized pink octopus in a tiny chef's coat dropped into my hand, waving a spatula the size of a chopstick, thrilled to pieces to have arrived in the human world. Uncle Z's apprentice, sent by the god of feasts himself, a living summoned creature, which is one of the rarest things in this whole game, a teammate who cannot ever betray you because the binding won't allow it. She could cook 3 dishes that healed and buffed and restored. She could vanish, turning her skin the exact color of whatever she sat on until you couldn't find her on your own shoulder, and she could spit a mouthful of color-shifting illusion ink that stood up and became anything she'd seen, a full-size talking copy of her red uncle, spatula and all. Uncle Z, she told me proudly, had decided she was too weak to fight head-on and would make a far better assassin than a warrior. I looked at this loyal, cheerful, shape-shifting, invisible little creature that a god had handed me for free, and I thought, the universe finally gave me a partner in crime who's actually built for the crime. She told me her name was Ba, that I could call her Ba or Baba, and said it so earnestly that I couldn't bring myself to. Director is my codename, I told her, so you should have one too. I'll call you Sophia. And she cheered and bounced in my palm like I'd knighted her, and settled onto my shoulder and turned the color of my jacket and started talking to me straight through some soul link only I could hear, marveling at how many humans were sitting around drinking with no banquet at all. So I did the softest thing I'd done in 3 weeks. I didn't go back to my room. I walked into the top floor lounge and sat at the bar and ordered a lemon mocktail and a plate of ham for a shape-shifting octopus who'd never seen the human world, so she could watch a bartender work and maybe, being an apprentice, learn something new. She didn't learn anything. She had a wonderful time, and I would have left it there, sober and alive with an invisible octopus narrating the bartender's every move in delight, except that the bartender coming on for the next shift took off his apron, and the person who replaced him was small and ponytailed, and grinning at me with an expression that was not remotely professional. My club president, Gao Rui, she'd swapped shifts on purpose, because a scholarship kid from a poor family had suddenly started booking 400-meter suites and ordering off the executive menu, and Gao Rui, being Gao Rui, had decided to get to the bottom of it. And here is the one terrible truth of my life. I can fool my own sister. I could fool a god. I cannot fool my club president because she knows my acting and my whole backstory too well, and I would genuinely rather lie to a deity again than improvise in front of her. So I fed her an investment windfall and steered hard, and she let me steer and told me she was there raising money for our club, which runs on $5,000 a year, while her lead actor keeps demanding more realistic props, and I almost believed her, which should have been my warning. Because at the door, leaving, she turned around and smiled and asked lightly whether I happened to be a death game player. The floor dropped out of me. I'd tested her weeks ago, tried to say the words to her and hit the throat wall, and concluded she was an ordinary person. I was wrong, and being wrong about Gao Rui is a very bad place to be. She was a player, a tier 3 player, an outsourced member of Order no less, which is a fancier thing than a real one. The forum's little trick for spotting players, she told me, doesn't work on the high-level ones, because the people running the forum filter what the newbies get to know and lean toward Order while they're at it. She'd suspected me for 2 weeks, ever since I got distracted and started asking her to dig up strange people. My best friend in the real world had been quietly watching over me the whole time, and I finally understood who'd turned every screen in a Henan internet cafe blood red and reached through a monitor to slap Kaylin for swearing. The hacker was her, and before she left she gave me one thing worth more than any item. She told me what rank advancement actually is, the thing no forum guide will say. Clearing a dungeon barely touches the world you clear it in. You survive, you leave, the world forgets you. But a rank advancement task always points at the one thing in that world that matters most, and completing it carves you into that world forever, so that a whole reality remembers a single player for all time. That's the secret. And she looked at me when she said it, this genius, this madwoman, and told me it was a lot like the thing I loved most. Rank advancement, she said, is the process of making another world remember you. Then she took the hotel's free skincare and imported snacks and left, and Sophia exhaled on my shoulder and said that woman felt scary and would not say why. I sat with that for a while after she was gone, because it reframed everything. For weeks I'd been carefully keeping Gao Rui away from the death game, holding my one good friend at arm's length precisely because the psychological society hunts and kills people with too much potential, and if there was anyone in my life who reeked of dangerous potential, it was her. And it turned out I'd been guarding a door she was already standing on the other side of, a tier 3 Order administrator, deeper into this world than I was, quietly burying my tracks and scaring off anyone who got close to my name. My protector had needed no protection. It should have been a comfort, and part of it was, but part of it sat wrong, because it meant that even the friendship I'd been trying hardest to keep clean of all this had been, the whole time, another mask sitting across from mine at a bar, 2 players pretending to be a drama club and its president. And I made a quiet decision, right there, that whatever else I dragged into the tangle of Old Wang and He-Ran and June and a dead man named Craftsman, I would keep exactly 2 people out of it. The sister who raised me, and the president who calls me her ace. Those 2 relationships I would not turn into performances, even if one of them already half was. A man needs at least 1 room he doesn't have to act in. I have 2. I intend to keep them. But the truly funny part, the part that told me exactly how far I'd already come, was waiting on my phones. All of them. Because a cryptic line I'd tossed off at a floating dinner table to sound like a lunatic had, in the few hours since, turned the entire underworld inside out. A May had gone straight to the Marauders forum and posted my riddle with a reward attached. Help me solve this. Urgent. Tycoon had sent the Zhonggan Hall a warning that Order's Haicheng branch was flagging tier 3 players inbound to Zhongcheng. Every organization with a name had started moving overnight, and the forum's discussion boards were on fire. Something's happening in Zhongcheng. It's about a mystery expert from the Psychological Society. I sat in my luxury suite reading 4 phones belonging to 4 people who don't exist, watching my one throwaway sentence rearrange the map of an entire country, and I did the only responsible thing. I poured a little more fuel on it. As he ran, I warned Sunjia that powerful players were converging on the city. Be careful. As Serotonin's shadow, I let the legend spread. My whim was becoming an event, and the forum caught fire under it. Overnight, the discussion boards filled with players who had nothing to do with any of it, trading theories, asking each other what was happening in Zhongcheng, why every organization with a name had suddenly gone quiet then loud at once, whether it was true a mystery agent of the Psychological Society was behind it. Bounty hunters started asking directions to my city. Nobodies from 3 provinces over decided that whatever was about to happen at the Broken Bridge, they wanted to be near it, to watch, to profit, to matter. I scrolled through hundreds of strangers working themselves into a frenzy over a sentence I'd made up to sound unhinged, and I understood that I had, entirely by accident, written the best piece of theater of my life, a production with a cast of thousands who each thought they were the audience. The only person who knew it was a show was the one who'd never meant to stage it. And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, my phones kept ringing. Kalen, 100 panicked messages, all of them "Are you there?" None of them saying why, and when I called him, he begged me to team up for his rank advancement. Which is when I learned that the great detective had failed his tier 1 trial not once, but was on his 2nd attempt, and had failed the first not by trying and losing, but by never once looking at the task, by teaming up every single time specifically so the trial couldn't complete, riding out his dungeons on borrowed items. What if I just never advance? He asked me, sincerely. Buy 1 team card every 10 dungeons, take no risks, isn't that a good deal? I have met a lot of players. Beautiful girls who kill without blinking, sweet doctors who murder their boyfriends, naive kids who somehow survive. Kalen is the only one who has ever left me completely without words. And then I told him the truth, as a friend, because he's genuinely mine now, that death never gets merciful just because you're a coward, that I'd been terrified facing my own trial too, and that hiding forever only works until the day it doesn't. And he sniffled and said he'd try this time, and I let myself feel good about it for exactly 1 minute. Because the last message was from Order. Wei Ning, the Zheng City squad leader who thinks I'm a loyal doctor of good character, wanted June to join an operation in Jiangcheng, paid, effective immediately. So the next morning I put on a face and walked into a private room at the Jiangcheng Hotel and found Order had, in one night, assembled 6 squad leaders, 5 Tier 2 players, and 30 Tier 1s, an army, mobilized against a single unknown assassin, against Serotonin, against me. I sat there quietly cataloging the most powerful gathering of players I'd ever seen and understanding, for the first time all the way down, exactly how big a rock I'd kicked loose. And then the door opened and the administrator running the whole operation walked in, adjusting his glasses, and introduced himself as Wan Lei of Haicheng, the gambler from the banquet, come in person because a psychological society madwoman had invited him to Jiangcheng in a riddle, and I got to watch Wan Lei be a completely different animal than the one I'd sat beside in the sky. At the banquet, he'd been a cold clock of a man doing lethal arithmetic. Here he was a politician, and a good one. When a loud buzz-cut Haicheng captain barged in complaining that they'd been dragged to Jiangcheng understaffed, Wan Lei flattened him in 2 sentences, and then, before the man could lose face, he handed him a graceful reason to feel useful, and did the same for the whole room of unpaid recruits. 30 strangers assembled overnight walked out of that meeting feeling chosen instead of used. The same mind that had watched 6 people nearly fall out of the sky and calculated who to let drop was, in the real world, the warm and steady hand that holds an organization together. I filed that away with a small chill because I'd only ever seen half of him, and the other half was the half that runs Order. He wrote my own cryptic lineup on a whiteboard for a room full of Order's finest to decode. 30 pieces of silver, Judas, The Last Supper, Maundy Thursday, evening. They had the time. They only lacked the place. And I sat among the hunters wearing the face of one loyal doctor and helped them plan the ambush of a woman who was, at that exact moment, sitting 3 seats away drinking their tea. They had the time. They only needed the place, and the place was in my own riddle, so of course I knew it. I just made sure it reached them the long way around. I didn't solve it out loud for Order, because a room that full of clever people would get there on its own, and because I had a better use for the answer. I sold it, everywhere. As Old Wang, I handed the whole solution to Tycoon and let the Zhonggan Hall claim Order's reward, wrapping it in Old Wang's growing legend as the guy with clever friends who can get anything solved. As he ran, I dangled it in front of Sunjia to cement that face too. I even watched the Marauders' second-ranked player, a diviner who barely needed the riddle, arrive at it by sheer power. One line I'd invented on a whim was now being triumphantly decoded by every dangerous mind in the country, each of them certain they were cracking the scheme of an S-class assassin, none of them knowing they were doing homework I'd assigned myself, and the answer was almost too neat. Everyone's first instinct was the Bible, rainbow as Noah's covenant, but a covenant rainbow points nowhere on a map. The first half of my line wasn't scripture at all, rainbow at dusk. Why specify dusk when the silver coins already gave the day? Because dusk and rainbow together aren't a covenant, they're Ragnarok, the Norse twilight of the gods, and the rainbow in that story is Bifrost, the bridge between worlds, and in Ragnarok, Bifrost breaks. Jiangcheng has 100 bridges. Only one of them is broken. Not a bridge over water at all. The abandoned, half-built, once-collapsed south stretch of the ring-elevated road in the southern suburbs, a dead concrete overpass that goes nowhere, a perfect place for players to settle scores. Thursday, 7 in the evening, on the broken rainbow at the end of the world. I'd built the invitation better than I realized. I always do the good work by accident. But the part that genuinely delighted me, the part I only pieced together later, was what the smart ones did with it. Because in a luxury car crossing the city, 3 of the most powerful people in this world sat looking at the same screen, Wan Lei the gambler, Tycoon, and a mechanical voice with no body that the other 2 treated with a junior's careful respect, the Jiangcheng administrator, the hacker, who I now understood with a cold drop in my stomach, was my own club president. And they weren't asking where or when anymore. They were asking why. Why would a psychological society assassin broadcast a riddle to a whole dungeon of elites, knowing it would spread, knowing every organization would gather its people to solve it and converge on one spot? And the hacker, my Gao Rui, laid it out like it was obvious, because to her it was. 2 purposes. First, to flush out one specific person. You hide a tree in a forest. You make the whole world assemble in one place so that the single person you actually want to reach is standing somewhere in the crowd. indistinguishable, unavoidable. And second, chaos, because the psychological society believes above all that chaos accelerates growth, and every dangerous player in the country now stampeding toward one broken overpass was a riot waiting to happen, one they put it better than 70% to be worse than the Snow Mountain thing a year ago. They were right. That's the thing that still makes me laugh. They were completely right about the shape of it. There was a scheme. It was designed to gather a crowd and hide one specific person inside it and tip the whole board into beautiful chaos. They just had two small facts wrong. The mastermind wasn't an S-class assassin of the psychological society. He was a broke second-year drama student who'd been dead for 3 weeks. And the one specific person hidden in the forest, the tree the whole army was marching out to find, wasn't standing in the crowd at all. He was standing in 4 places at once. That afternoon, I rode out of the meeting in the back of an order squad van, a rented courier truck driven by a henpecked policeman whose fierce wife had followed him on the trip, which was why our whole squad was somehow all men. I sat in the last row with the universal body language of leave me alone, the loyal Dr. June doing his part for the righteous cause, and under that I quietly worked 3 other phones belonging to 3 other people who don't exist. On one, as Old Wang, I sold Tycoon the answer to my own riddle and collected orders reward through the Jongan Hall. On another, as he ran, I fed the same answer to Sun Jia and watched the Freedom Alliance nibble. On a third, I read Craftsman's messages, a dead man's inbox, and tracked the marauders massing toward the bridge. One person, in the back of the hunter's own truck, was simultaneously the hunter, the hunted, the tip line, and the entire information economy connecting all 3, and the only witness to the joke was a palm-sized octopus on my shoulder who kept whispering that this all seemed like a very large amount of trouble for one human. She wasn't wrong. But I couldn't stop grinning because I finally understood the size of what I'd become. A doctor inside order, planning the ambush. A thief inside the Jangan Hall, selling the map to it. A veterinarian at the Freedom Alliance's elbow. And one ordinary young man in the wings, watching every faction in the country march toward a broken bridge at the end of the world on a Thursday of his choosing to hunt a woman who does not exist for reasons not one of them had right. 3 weeks ago, I was a second-year drama student who had never told a serious lie, and a girl in a sailor uniform put a bullet through me on my own stage. Since then, I have played a detective, played a god, outlied a god, worn 4 dead men's faces into 4 rival armies, and grown a single invented sentence into a war the whole underworld is marching to fight. There's a woman at home who dropped out of school to raise me and thinks I've been out filming ad videos, and everything I've built, every mask and lie and stolen name, I built to keep that one small, warm, ordinary life safe at the center of all of it. I still don't know who the girl in the sailor uniform really is, or why she chose me, or what a god wants with a liar. But I know her name now, and I know her face because I wear it. And on Thursday, on the broken rainbow, with the whole world assembled and the lights all the way up, I am finally going to go looking for her. Ask me who the outsider is now.